And let me formally start the meeting. Ding. I'm Bill Graham. I'm the president of the Rotary Dare to Be Great eClub, and I declare this meeting on 28 September 1924, or 2024, don't want to lose 100 years there, to be open. Our topic for this week is actually something that we had on the agenda for last week, but the discussions were so good on the other two topics for the week that we never got to this third topic. So we're going to address it today. Now, last week, what we had on the agenda was what can we do about children in preschool age. We know from there's so many studies out there that show one of the biggest factors that is leading to unsatisfactory education outcomes is the fact that many children are not afforded equal opportunities in their early years in life. So that we see in developed countries that students from lower socioeconomic backgrounds start the formal education in kindergarten or first grade up to 2 years behind in verbal vocabulary, which is crucial for ongoing learning, and also mental maturity. So that we really we needed to say, how do we close that education gap in preparing children to be successful in education? How do we make sure all children have an equal preparation for being successful in school by the time they start school? So that was one of the topics of last week. And I'll be putting out a summary of that. As those of you who just joined, I mentioned that I've now figured out how we can take these multi-hour recordings there that I don't want to put anybody through and get those summarized into much shorter sessions, hopefully 20, 30-minute sessions that describe all the key takeaways from those meetings. So anyway, the first topic last meeting was how we close the education gap on children prior to beginning school. That's irrespective if the problem is their family or their home life doesn't speak the language that is spoken in the school, putting those children at a huge disadvantage. And this is a particular problem in Pakistan or in many of the African countries, because there are so many different local languages being spoken. And then when you get to school, all of a sudden here, you're using a national language, which many children, they may understand the basics, but they're really not that fluent in, or the fact that they haven't been exposed to a lot of general knowledge about the world or just how things work and so forth. So they don't have that mental maturity to be able to combine pieces of information. So that was one of the topics we talked about, and especially we talked about how relatively low-cost artificial intelligence would enable every child to be able to reach the start of school more or less at the level of what a privileged child from a wealthy London suburb or in Boston in the United States or what have you, that's going to private preschools and things like that would be able to attain. So that's one thing. And if you're interested in that, just post in the chat that you'd like to, if you missed that session, you'd like to know more about that, and that'll give me a little bit of impetus to get the information that we discussed out on that. The second topic we discussed was right now, a lot of educators around the world feel that artificial intelligence is bad for education. It enables students to cheat. It enables students to bypass the learning process by getting the AI to do their homework for them, to write their essays for them, to think for them, to come up with ideas for projects or whatever for them. And what we presented was, how do we use AI to actually increase creative thinking, critical thinking, to improve their communication skills, to improve how they think, their reasoning processes, and their problem-solving processes. Because let's face it, those are some of the most critical things that we want people to learn, especially in the secondary schools and post-secondary universities and so forth. And so many educators think artificial intelligence hinders that. And so we showed a concrete example of how you can tune an artificial intelligence to pay attention and judge what the student, how they're thinking, and how they're communicating, and to improve that. Because if the student is communicating with the AI, even to say, "Can you help me write this essay?" or whatever, are they clearly providing the guidance? Are they judging what is coming back for? Is it complete? Is it accurate? Is it saying what I want to say? We showed how that can be. Uh, Michael, I'm going to mute you. Okay. So, whoops. Okay, so at any rate, those are the two items. And the third item here, I think we did a pretty good job. We showed the prompts that you could put into artificial intelligence to have the artificial intelligence in the background be constantly evaluating the students' communication skills, their creative thinking skills, actually observing their chain of thought, how they're reasoning things, and then making suggestions how the students could improve on each of those subject areas. So again, if that's a particular area you're interested in, how that can be, again, post it in the chat so I remember to get the details out on what we discussed on that. Okay, so then the topic that we didn't get to was the headline for the meeting last week was, how can we get 100% of kindergarten through the end of secondary school? How can we get all those students to be at 100% grade level, or at least being able to achieve a 95% on grade level exams? Right now, in most school systems around the world, if you get a 60 or 70% correct on grade level exams, you're considered to have passed that grade, to satisfy the requirements for the grade level, and we move you on. And there's a very interesting video from Sal Khan, the founder of Khan Academy, where he talks about mastery-based education, and he sort of says, well, imagine you're building a house, and you pour the foundation, and the inspector comes along and says, yeah, well, there's a little bit of weakness over here and a little bit of problem over there, but hey, it's 70%. Okay, go ahead. You can build the next floor. And then when you build the first floor, he comes back and he does the same thing. And he says, yeah, the first floor it's got some issues here and some issues there, but you know what? 70%. Go ahead and build the next floor. We can pretty much be assured at some point that house is going to collapse because we have all these collections of 70%. So we got all these holes, if you would, or deficiencies in what we're building. So the question is, can we come up with a way so that we know that all the students completing secondary school have really 100% mastered everything they need to know to be successful in life? And especially today, we know, following the Transforming Education Summit at the United Nations the year before last, that the goals have moved. The goals for education are not so much now, do you know math? Do you know chemistry? Do you know physics? Do you know your history? All those things. That's secondary. The number one goal of education is, do you know how to learn? Are you prepared to be a successful lifelong learner? Because we know the shelf life of knowledge has declined so much. The information is coming so fast. You have to continually be learning for whatever your field is, and whatever you do in life. You got to be learning all the time. So you have to know how to learn, because there's no teacher when you're 35 years old. There's no teacher standing behind you saying, "Now, Johnny, I want you to do this for homework tonight." Right? So you've got to feel confident in your ability to learn. And in the United States here, we have this phenomena right now in what we call the Rust Belt. That's the old industrial belt in the middle west of the United States, where so many people used to work in manufacturing and the like. And many of those jobs have been replaced, either because the technology advanced. They went from carburetor-based engines into fuel injection engines and so forth. And so many people they didn't know the new technologies, and they were left out. And many of our graduates of schools say, I'm really not good at learning. It wasn't my thing, because our education system is built on the basis of time. You during this time you learn this, and during that time you learn that, and you learn it to some degree. You don't necessarily fully master it, but we never took time to teach people how to learn. So those who just eked their way through school, they made it through school. They were able to do some things, and in an apprenticeship program, they learned how to do certain things. When the situations changed and that thing they know how to do was not the thing that was in demand anymore, they felt left out. And as a result, we have this thing called deaths of despair. We have a lot of working class men, mostly men, because they're at that age where they're in their 50s, let's say late 40s, 50s, 60s, who went through school during those earlier decades there. And when the situation changed and they felt here, wait a minute, I spent my time learning. I shouldn't have to learn anything more. And then they're cast out. They've got no role. They can't get a job because the skills they have are no longer in demand, and they do not feel confident in their ability to learn what's necessary for the new skills. And so we see many suicides among men, and that's why we have this thing called deaths of despair. And we see the life expectancy in the United States has declined significantly in the last 10 years. So at any rate, so the what we want to talk about today is there some way that we can dramatically increase the percentage of students who truly fully master all the learning materials, the education levels that they go through in the formal education process, and at the same time master learning how to learn, master it to the degree that they are confident that they can learn anything at any time for the rest of their lives. In fact, that they're continually learning, and they're not afraid. They're not afraid. I'm not a good learner. So because in our school system today, where we keep telling the students, no, sorry, that's wrong. No, sorry, that's wrong. Oh, you missed 30% on this test here, and leave students thinking that they're really not capable of learning. So I want to stop at this point and invite all of you, please. What are your comments on this whole sequence that we've been following here on preparing students for education even before they start their formal education, then going and really helping students master the toughest things, the critical thinking, the problem solving, the chain of reasoning of their thinking, and now talking about how do we ensure that every student has fully mastered all of the foundational materials that are going to help them through life, and including having learned how to learn. So please, comments on that and then we'll jump right into this subject area of mastering K through 12.
Okay, just to go back just a slight bit to you know, men in their 40s, 50s, or whatever. What sort of outreach is being done there with regards to AI and how to teach those people how to learn and get them into, you know, meaningful jobs or whatever in their lives afterwards? Is there
Yeah,
anything along those lines?
I think right now there are many efforts ongoing. AI, let's face it, AI, as far as the general public goes, is brand new, and
Hmm,
it is expanding literally every day. Every day,
right.
I'm going to demonstrate something here before our next meeting. I'm going to, along with the invitation, I'm going to expose some things I promised last week. I would provide some list of good sources where you can keep up to date on what's happening with AI and so forth. But the field is so new that we see in education, most educators are looking at AI, especially generative AI, to make their lives easier.
Hmm,
Please help me prepare a quiz. Please help me prepare a lesson plan. Rather than focusing on how I can get AI to help the student learn. There are groups doing that. I mentioned the school in Austin, Texas, that they have taken the teachers out of the instruction and grading process and turned all of that over to AI. And as a
which
result,
school is that?
pardon?
Which school is that? Because
Oh,
I mean, not Austin, Texas. I wouldn't mind paying them a visit at some point or other.
I will try to find the name of the Alpha School. I think it's called the Alpha School.
Oh,
They've now got campuses in multiple cities. They've exploded because of their success. They've jumped into the top 2.5% of schools in the United States based on the education outcome, and they're doing
oh,
it with only 2 hours of academic studies per day. In only 2 hours per day, they're in the top 2.5% of schools in the United States. That has freed up the rest of the day to provide more arts education, more enabling students to pursue their hobbies and delve into their hobbies. So this is a very interesting experiment. But again, that's so radically different from where most schools are. So that's why they stand out because they're so rare. But they were mentioned on one of the major TV channels had a documentary on them just within the last few days. One of our associate members just sent
right.
me the link, and I still have not been able to watch that show, but I've had contact with one of the students there in the school, and it's absolutely amazing. But that because of where this is so new, and we have to remember that
Oh,
we're not, our society's really not set up to provide education for you once you get out of the formal education system. There might be social programs that are trying to help you find a job and so forth, but they're not set up to go and really provide the kind of training. There might be some vocational training programs that you can go to, but these programs are even further away from people thinking, "How can I use AI to support them?" And and a lot of the deaths of despair are coming because of drugs, substance abuse, people who
hmm,
have lost all hope for their future. They feel that they are total failures because they're not able to support their family. They've grown up in this mentality that it's the man's job to
there you go.
support
To
his
support the
family.
family. Yeah. Yeah.
And when they're not able to do that, we see just so many such hopelessness. And there's a lot of documentaries that are coming out about this hopelessness. And I think once we can show AI can really enable you to learn anything at any time and make that generally available to the public, um,
Hmm,
maybe we have a chance. But it's hard when somebody's given up and doesn't believe they can learn. They don't believe they can learn. So even if somebody goes and says the Learning Center's got a program for you here, they don't go because they don't think it's for them. And that's a big part of the problem. Yes, any other comments about
Yeah,
our,
I have
Joe.
yeah. So there's a number of things. Ageism is one of them. Older people. I can't speak for men because I always think that men are more likely to look at technology than women, but that's just an opinion that has no basis in any knowledge. So that, but I find that older people as a whole do not are less open to change because they have stuck in their heads that, I'm supposed to work somewhere for X amount of years and, I get a pension. So there is that. What I found is that younger people, and I mean even kids, are entranced by the technology. They want to play with it, they want to learn it. So it becomes a fun thing, but they're learning as well. They're not putting in the um, ideas of, I've got to do this for work and get stressed out. So it's a different approach. Um, but also AI, I think, stresses older people out because somehow, maybe from movies, I'm not sure, that AI is going to take over their lives, and the loss of control, not only in their jobs but in their lives in general, right? I mean, I hear that, oh, that AI is coming, like they speak in fair language, as opposed to saying, oh, AI is coming. Is that another internet? How does that help us? How can we learn it? How can we use it in our everyday lives? So, so that those are just something I wanted to bring up. But my commentary in terms of learning is uh, AI is very helpful if you know the right questions to ask it. Um, because a lot of people, like you mentioned about teachers using it for how do I prepare my lesson plan or create my lesson plan. But what they need is something like, how do I engage my students? How do I, like, it's the questions student centered rather than teacher centered that will probably be the most helpful. So I found that in playing with it myself, I play with it because I find that when I'm in a fun mood, I tend to be more experimental than when I'm actually seriously looking for something. And I thought, oh, that's what kids do. They play with it, play with the words, and you get a lot more information. So I think that this whole idea of introducing it to others it's maybe a playful thing to start with, to say that it's, you can control this, it's in your hands, kind of thing. It's a powerful tool.
Yeah.
So that's my comment.
I think that's very interesting. You mentioned two things I'd like to follow up on. One is the factor of the elderly being afraid. If you're telling them, oh, you need to know AI or whatever. My mother never touched a keyboard in her life until she was in her 80s. When she was in her 90s, she was holding classes in the senior residence to teach people how to use computers. And it wasn't because she wanted to know how to use a computer or she thought using a computer was cool. It's because she was introduced to Skype. And with Skype here, my grandmother or my mother's grandchildren have grown up on different continents from where she lives. And she almost never got a chance to see them. And all of a sudden, she's able to talk to her grandchildren and on a regular basis. She was able to communicate with them asynchronously because she discovered email. So it's the use cases, I think, that we need to be talking about, not the idea that you should love technology. And we should be talking about, hey, do you know you can do this? Do you know? Wouldn't you love to be able to do that? And demonstrate that to folks. So I think that's one aspect. And then you mentioned here knowing the right questions, knowing the questions to ask as you get introduced. That's what we talked about last week with regards to older students here. In one of the most valuable things that I found in dealing with ChatGPT and Claude and so forth is that it really causes me to think about how I formulate what I ask for. The words that you pick, certain words will narrow the context of what you're looking for, make it more clear. And as you ask questions and you don't get the answer you're looking for, and you begin to think, darn, why didn't I do this, phrase it this way? So now I have to ask a follow-up question to get closer to what I want. But I recall, oh, wait a minute. When I ask my questions, I have to make sure I use that wording. I have to include this. And so my communication skills get better and better the more I interact with the chatbots. My confidence level that I'm going to get an answer that I like, that is useful to me, go up, the better I get at formulating my questions and my prompts. So that, and this is really important. When ChatGPT first came out in November of 22, it jumped to 100 million users in 60 days, the fastest that any technology in history has ever grown. But then we saw a dropout off over the next few months in the number of users. And why? Because people started to say, you know what? This thing can't even add and multiply. It gives me wrong answers all the time. And it gives me stupid answers. It tells me that when did Abe Lincoln land on the moon? And it gives me an answer. And it says he did that in year such and such. So it's absolutely hallucinating, stupid answers. And when I asked it to make a picture for me, it can't even spell. If there's words and a sign and an image that it creates, it doesn't make any sense. The letters don't make any sense. And even beyond that here, it doesn't even know that humans have 5 fingers on each hand. Sometimes it's 8 fingers in a hand. Sometimes it's only 3. This stuff is useless. I don't trust it. So therefore, I'm going to stop asking. So the usage went way, way off. Now, the people who stuck with it, they learned that, oh, if I give it context, if I say, look, I'm interested in knowing about some scientific thing or some medical thing or whatever, and I tell it, only use peer-reviewed papers to seek in formulating your response. I know I'm going to get a much better response than if I just ask and I get some comment from somebody who was walking through Piccadilly Circus or Times Square and was randomly asked, can you tell me what the formula for some chemical reaction is? And who knows what I get for an answer. So we've seen that over the last almost 2 years now, that the ability to formulate useful prompts has really grown tremendously. And in fact, just within the last 2 days, there's a YouTube channel out there called the AI Advantage. This gentleman, Igor, who lives in Europe, he has now gotten a team, and they've put together a document or a paper or a database, whatever you want to call it, with 33,000 proven prompts that are structured by profession and task within the professions to be able to get accurate answers. So you might want to just take a look. The AI Advantage. He comes out with weekly reports with what he calls news you can use, where he only describes AI things that you can actually access now. We see a lot of AI stuff that's there, and they show you stuff, but it's not available to you. You can't actually use it. They're just teasing, if you would. So at any rate, it's so important here because whether there's AI out there or not, your ability to ask accurate questions, meaningful questions to what you're seeking, or your ability to give accurate instructions, that's been a common thing of life. We could go back 100 years, and if you're trying to give a colleague instructions, hey, we need you to build this piece, but you have to put these tolerances in it, or you've got to do it this way, or you have to follow this sequence or whatever. That's always been a problem. I can recall when I was my early days as an Army officer and in logistics, And one of the problems we had in the military during the Vietnam War, especially your staff was constantly being rotated. And so we constantly had to be retraining the new people that were coming into the jobs to process orders, for example, in a warehouse, of what's the sequence you go through? How do you make sure you're not giving up your critical reserves and things like this? And I actually created a paper document that listed the steps that worker had to go through. And they were told, you put your marker on point 1, and you don't take your marker off until you've followed through each of the steps to make sure you didn't miss any. But that process of learning how to communicate effective is so important in life. And AI can be a tremendous tool in that, especially if the AI you're communicating with is looking specifically at how you're communicating, evaluating how you could improve your communication, because it sees, oh, it took you 3 tries to get the question formulated in a way that would provide you with the answer that you were looking for. If you had phrased your question this way or that way, or paid attention to this aspect, you would be more effective and efficient in your communication. And whether it's an instruction, whether it's a question, whatever. So these are the kinds of things that we were looking at with AI. Don't think of it just to do the primary thing you want to do. When we're looking at education, we have to remember, while it's delivering the education, it can be looking at your communication with it and being able to judge, are you applying critical thinking? Are you creative in the way you're formulating things? Are you communicating effectively? And then guide and coach the student to improve those things. Yes, Ian.
Yeah, it's been suggested a while ago that the knowledge base that's in the military, particularly where you have situations that where people are coming in rather badly educated and having to bring them up, that has, if you had AI take a look at that, it would make an enormous difference to education.
Yeah. Yeah, and one of the things we're seeing here, well, we're not seeing it so obviously, but that we know is happening within companies. Companies are actually very intensely pursuing AI for training their employees. Most companies operate by standard operating procedures. For every job they've got, they say, this is how that job should be performed, because it's necessary that job dovetail with the other jobs that other people are doing. And so AI is proving to be really fantastic on that. And there are new tools, just mentioning one, Notebook LM, that from Google that came out. It's just being constantly updated every day almost. But it came out. You can dump up to 50 documents of all lengths or combination documents, YouTube videos, all kinds of information into a notebook. And you can have as many notebooks as you want, but you take a notebook, you take all the information, you dump it into it, and then it will create a summary of everything that's important out of all those 50 documents. Even it'll create a verbal audio podcast where 2 people are describing, oh, what's interesting about this and about that. These are the things that are interesting on that, and it's mind-boggling. I just one of the things, as I say, I want to send out to everybody before next week is I had to take one of our old multi-hour YouTube videos, and it created 2 people chatting about this YouTube. Was it a good YouTube? What did it discuss? Was it interesting what it discussed? And it's amazing. That's all I can say about that. And that's only one. We're seeing so much. Anyway, though, we're today we need to make sure we get to our main topic today. Can we take students of all kinds of backgrounds? Can we take students from schools that have been failing, schools that in decades have not achieved even 10% of students at grade level? And can we have those schools make a dramatic leap in education outcomes, in education achievement in a very short time, in as short as a single year? And when I say that here, as I said, right now, 70, 80% is considered a passing grade in most subjects in most school systems. But in fact, when we go and look at the third-party evaluations of our school systems, we find that I don't think we have any state in the United States that has even 50% of fourth graders at grade level in either reading or math. So even though we say, hey, 70% gets you on to the next level, we're not there. We're passing students on regardless. And in fact, I had when I was teaching at Purdue University, I encountered a junior in university, third-year student in the university. He couldn't read. He couldn't read. How can you be a third-year student in a university in a computer technology program and not be able to read? Well, he was a star athlete. He was golden. He was very expensively recruited by the university. He was a backup athlete to the U.S. Olympic team. He was the star football player, and nobody touched him. I had come in from the outside. They had asked me and to build a program there, and so I sacrificed. I was the CEO of a major corporation, and I gave that up to take on the life of a pauper, which is in comparison what an educator at a university has for an income. So they couldn't touch me. What are they going to do? Tell me go back and make a lot more money? And I caused this student to have a grade that did not allow him to participate in sports. And I'm sure here the university regretted me being in their program very strongly at that point. We have to remember, in the United States, sports in universities is pretty highly rated. In fact, here in New Jersey, it's interesting to note the most expensive government employee in the state of New Jersey is not the governor. It's the coach of the football team of the state university. He makes more money. His salary is higher than the salary of the governor of the state. He's the highest paid public official in the state here. Ian, did you want to add something there?
Yeah, I worked for an educational organization in Ireland, and they the official thing came out that about that literacy level in full adult literacy level in Ireland was only at 25% of the time. And I didn't really believe that, because I don't know, I suppose I had a particular experience of education, but we had a meeting where two people came in. One was your typical teenage pregnancy type thing, didn't have a good education as a result of that. But this one guy was quite successful businessman. He had got through his, what you call the leaving cert in Ireland, where he'd actually failed his English, but he'd done so well in his math that he got a job anyway. And it was back in the days when you didn't need a degree. And he couldn't read. So we're like, well, how on earth did you operate as what was was a sort of executive position in this company? What he would do is he'd get a report and give it to a subordinate and ask them to read it, and then just very cleverly question them about the thing. I suppose what you could do with ChatGPT these days, if you didn't want to actually read the thing, and that's how he did it. And at some point or other, he decided, well, maybe, considering how much intelligence he had put into covering, he decided, let's go to the vocational educational committee and see if they can do something for me. And he learned to read at that point.
Actually, here, that student here, I actually did help him. We became very good friends, and I was able to help him learn to read. And he became very successful in a international database company. So it shows you can. And one thing we have to realize, even in the worst performing schools out there, there's a percentage of students, they'll succeed regardless of what you put in their way. We see so many examples of people that did not have the opportunity of formal education, but they're very successful because they learned through common sense and observing. So we always have to.
Yeah, I think the
in
model for academic education was that, you know, you go into a monastic settlement, and those who just have it, and they'll be given the books, and those who don't, you know, will do the gardening and the plowing and whatever they're good at. And you know, I think the school system kind of adopted that, and the people who adopt well to it aren't even aware that there's a problem for anybody else.
And it's important that we. Yes.
There's lots of illiterate adults in Manchester at the moment.
Yeah,
you know, thousands.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I was traveling about over 30 years ago, I traveled around the United States after fulfilling my pledge to set up this course sequence at Purdue. I decided the university was too late to make the kind of difference. Education bug had bitten me by then. And I decided university was too late to make the kind of difference that we need. So I took 3 years and I traveled around the country, Missouri, Texas, Georgia, all the northeastern states from Washington, D.C., Northeast. Spoke to the better part of 1,000 educators, trying to understand what was going on. My children had received their early education outside the United States. And so I was very curious as to what was going on in the U.S. It's very interesting to note. I came across some very interesting people. One of them, it was the head of the oncology department at the major teaching university, hospital teaching university in New Jersey. And her mother had only gone as far as 3rd grade in India, in rural India. But her mother was taken out of school to walk her grandfather, who was a traveling judge, if you would, who would go from village to village to village to adjudicate conflicts that were taking place. And so this young girl, he was blind. Her grandfather was blind. So she was tasked to guide him from village to village as needed. And she would sit there, listen all day long to him, listening to these conflict cases brought before him, and his analysis of what was going on in judgments. And she gained an incredible education through that process. And then she basically forced her husband to allow his children to get an education. He did not want his children to get an education because he said, if the children get an education, they're going to leave the village because there's no need for higher education in the village. And so he didn't want his children to get an education and leave. She forced the issue. All the children got an education, 6 brothers and sisters, all became engineers, doctors, and scientists, and very successful. And all of them left the village. So it's amazing what can be accomplished. So, but I want to share my screen now, and let's jump into this issue a little more. Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, let's see here if I can.
It's a bit small.
Okay, let me see if I can change this. Hold on, let me stop sharing and I'll try to increase the font there and then whoops.
While he's doing that, Ian, where in Ireland are you from?
I'm originally from Limerick. Well, I was born in England, actually. in Wolverhampton. And I'm now in living in Austin, Texas.
Oh, okay. Oh, I've been to Ireland, Dublin, and
Yeah.
I have to say I've visited about almost 42 cities
Okay.
in my lifetime, and Dublin was one of the most friendly cities in terms of pride. I've never met a more
Mm.
community that was so proud of being who they are without making you feel like you were on the outside. That's some doing, because a lot of people are
Yeah.
proud, but they make you feel like you're not part of them or whatever. But it was not so with the people in Dublin. I don't know about the rest of Ireland, but I'm
I
saying,
don't. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what that is, but I think, part of it is, having our own language and having our own culture, in spite of the fact that, we had the British Empire right beside us trying to suppress all that, and
yeah.
yet, it survived anyway, or at least
Anyway, I
did
just
to
wanted to
some
mention that,
extent.
and I had a good
Yeah.
time. They were so friendly, so helpful. But anyway, I'll share stories another time. Sorry.
Okay, no
Bill.
problem. No problem. Okay, so here I just wanted to remind everybody here. One thing that's really important, because we've got people on the call who are from regions where the primary problem is less about the performance in schools, but more about not even having the schools, not having the access to education, not having the access to teachers. I'll treat that one separately, but where because of the cost of attending school or whatnot, we have a large percentage of children not in school. I'm not going to discuss access at this point because we're focusing here on the method. How do we make the schools effective? Because one of the things the Brookings Institute, which is a famous think tank here in the United States, a number of years ago did a very detailed international study of the state of education in countries around the world. And they concluded that for most developing countries, if they wanted to catch up with the education levels of the developed countries, and they did that, they attempted to do that by following the models used in developed countries today, it would take more than 100 years for them to close that gap. And they concluded the only opportunity for developing countries is to find a way to leapfrog the approaches and technologies to be able to catch up, not to try to follow the same path.
But the thing is, Bill, it's not always about technology. I mean, in Pakistan, in the 80s and the 90s, the civil service was a meritocracy,
Yep.
and they made inroads. They did really well. But then after that, the sort of corrupt elite took over, and they purposely reversed all the gains. And the wider world supports that corrupt elite, you see. So even if we had the technology, they would suppress it.
Yeah, I hope we're going to see out of this. It's not for this particular part. What we talked about last week was AI, how technology can really help us jump forward. I hope we're going to see today that the main issue is less technology and more about strategy or approach. But and I do agree there are problems, and you and I both participate in sessions for Digital Pakistan, and I know through discussions there are many elites who deliberately do not want the people that they are currently exploiting to learn to read, similar to the way in the United States during the days of slavery. It was against the law to teach a slave to read, because that was the biggest fear that slave owners had, was that slaves might start to think for themselves. But that's a separate issue, and there are ways we can
There's
deal
still a
with
lot of that in the GOP.
well, let's leave the politics out of this, although I think we would agree on an awful lot on that. But the key thing here, well, we have to remember there's this thing in the United States called Common Core. Common Core, the idea was establish standards. What does it mean to have mastered second grade math? What does it mean to have mastered third grade math? What does that mean? So if you need to transfer from one school system to another, you know where you're at. And that was begun by the Republican governors who were trying to instill accountability into schools. They felt the problem with education was the lack of accountability because there was no agreed upon standards as to what was a good education and what was not a good education. The interesting thing was, as soon as the Democrats said, "Oh, that's a good idea," the Republicans decided, if the Democrats liked it, we have to be against it. So it was their own program, but right now they're sort of against it. Anyway, but that's all I'm going to say about politics. The bottom line here is that we're faced, and not only the United States, and I'll mention in a minute, but here in New Jersey, I spent over a year pulling together the statistics on over 1,300 elementary schools, primary schools in New Jersey, and analyzing the makeup of the student bodies, their performance levels at different grade levels, the class sizes, the funding, quality of teachers, or qualifications of teachers, and so forth and so on. And one of the things that really stood out was that in the top 10% of schools, on average, 92% of students were at grade level. But at the bottom 10%, it was fewer than 7% on average. So this is like incredible. And that was across the board. If we look at just math, the discrepancy was even bigger. Can't be too much bigger because there was only 8% left at the top and 7% left at the bottom. But it's horrendous. If this was a disease, we'd be declaring a national emergency. Now, the impact of that is also much greater than most people think. The district attorney from California, who did a study internationally looking at what are the impacts of this. He was looking at it particularly here for prison rates and what was the impact. And what he found was that how well you did in school really had an impact on what the crime rates were and the levels of incarceration. And what he found was, he found if there was a high dropout rate in a community, that the percentage of students in that school system that would end up going to prison before their 30th birthday was quite high. And when we did the study here in New Jersey, we found out two of our major cities, the whole city, the dropout rate was approximately 50%. And that includes the capital of the state of New Jersey, Trenton. And so when we applied the findings from this district attorney, it turns out that translates that statistically, 1 out of every 3 boys entering first grade in some of those schools was statistically damned to spend a year in prison before they were 30 years old. Now, you know, if you're one of those boys going into first grade, that's not something that does great for your confidence level here. The expectations become very low. So this is a really big problem. Now, the traditional or conventional wisdom is the low achieving schools is because of A, they have much less funding available, and B, the quality of the teachers must be much worse. So what we found is a huge inverse correlation between the achievement levels and poverty levels. So schools in the top 10% typically had less than 10% of students that were qualifying for a free or subsidized lunch, which is the standard of being able to say, hey, they're below the poverty level. Whereas in the bottom 10%, we saw the majority of students were qualifying for a free or subsidized lunch. So the school itself, if you had the overwhelming majority of students that are not poor or doing okay, they were high achieving, whereas schools that had a very high percentage of people with poor student backgrounds had a very low percent. And the thing about it is this is not just, hey, this year. We've got cities where the schools in the cities never get to 10% of students at grade level. So they're just perennial failures, if you want to treat them that way. And mostly, as I said, it's the funding disparities and the quality of teachers is what the politicians, especially, and a lot of the general public.
But Bill, what about the home life of the students in the poorest
Now
suburbs?
that's what we're going to get to here, because we can, when we talk about the causes, schools don't care if you're poor or not poor. It's the direct impact of being poor, the high absenteeism level, the amount of traumatism because of abusive home life or abusive neighborhood situation that cause huge distractions. There's the study, Bloomberg did a very intensive study in Providence, Rhode Island, the Bloomberg Foundation. And it's very famous because the headline was children from working and welfare class families by the end of their third year in life have heard up to 30,000 fewer words. What they did is they put microphones on babies so that they were able to track how many words these babies were hearing through their early stages of life. And up to 30 million fewer words by the end of age 3. And that those students from the working and welfare class families, when they began school, either kindergarten or first grade, they were up to 2 years behind in verbal vocabulary skills and in mental maturity. Now, once you get into the school system here in the United States, because we believe in equality, therefore, schools are required to treat every student the same. So that now we take, and because schools are neighborhoods, neighborhood-based primary schools, we grouped all the kids with the low mental maturity and verbal vocabulary skills, we grouped them into one school. And all the kids who had the privilege of private preschool and everything else and had very high verbal vocabularies and mental maturity, we group them into another school. And then the state comes along and says, now you got to treat them both equally. Therefore, we have this curriculum. You're expected to cover these topics within a particular school year. Well, if there's a 2-year difference in ability to absorb what's being presented, and it's not 2 years because the ones who went to those private preschools and whatnot are 2 years ahead because they're already coming to school reading, potentially speaking multiple languages, and being able to do basic numeracy. And now we treat them the same, and then we're surprised that the outcomes at the end of the first year aren't the same. Now, I'm going to come back to the point of the poverty factor here, but that's.
I want to, Bill, if you don't mind, I wanted to bring up something.
Yes.
Like we're talking about schools, and I can only go by my own personal experience that I'm going to share. I came from a pretty good family. I went to school. I hated being in school, hated it. I loved learning, but I hated being in a box, I used to call it, because I used to feel so confined. And so I'd go sit outside and read a book or something like that and get into trouble all the time. And I even went to boarding school, which I was really bored. And but I was very fortunate from the time I can remember, and I can remember as early as 5 years old, how many people took interest in me because they thought I was smart, but that's them. And the role of mentorship, that's from the time I was 5 until now, we're not so much right this minute, but my whole life, I've had people who taught me things through mentorship. I mean, I was an avid reader. I love to learn, but just not in a school setting. So when we think about AI, it's in a school setting, but what about those people who can't function very well sitting at a desk? Because I hated that. I like being out in the trees. I was like almost like a flower child when I didn't even know what that meant. I like being outside, and I would do my work outside. It's not that I didn't want to learn. So I think that there is, and like I said, I'm only speaking from my own experience, that I learned so much from just doing it. And people allowed me, even the teachers, even when I came to Canada. I mean, who knew? They made excuses for me because they all thought I had a great personality and I wanted to learn. So, I know teachers can't do that for 30 kids or 35 kids, but taking kids outside and opening them up to having sunshine and greenery, like maybe we have to rethink how schools are built, not just about the knowledge-based acumen
Yeah,
or,
especially you're right, especially if they're not getting that family atmosphere at home.
Yeah.
The school has to become their surrogate family.
Yeah. And that some schools are better at and some schools are worse at. And then you've got the environment when you bring together into one school all students who are in those very troubled backgrounds that where violence is sort of the main way of solving problems and so forth.
Yeah,
Even
so they're
very
never going to learn, are they? They're never going to discuss amongst their peers.
well,
Had this problem.
yeah, but that's what we're going to get into. So let me continue on because otherwise we're getting a little ahead of ourselves.
okay.
To the issue here of whether it's all funding, whether funding is the answer. One of the things we were a little surprised is we saw some of the worst performing schools in New Jersey were actually spending up to 40% more per year per student than top schools. So we said, oh, okay, well, I guess funding alone is not the answer. So then we said, well, what about if it's the quality of the teachers? So think about this. If just you can think of this as a mind game. I live in a very wealthy, very successful community. 96%, I think, of our high school graduates go on to four-year universities, one of the highest in the state, actually one of the highest in the country. And so if you were to ask the seventh grade math teachers in my community whether they'd be willing to pledge to get 100% of their students to 100% grade level by the end of the school year, they'd probably say, hey, no problem. That's what I do already. But if I was to go to Trenton or Camden and one of 19 other school districts in New Jersey and ask the same question, I'm going to probably get an answer more like, are you crazy? Yeah, that teacher in the high achieving school can make that pledge because 90+% of their students start the school year grade level ready. But 90% of my students start the school year 2, 3, 4, or more years behind. It's unfair that you even ask that I achieve the same results with such a disparity in student preparation, preparedness to learn at our grade level. And so some people I've actually heard teachers, and these are teachers from better schools and outside the US, say, oh, well, people who are poor are just less intelligent. And therefore their children are probably less intelligent. But then if we say that, how come we see examples where Professor Carol Dweck from Stanford University, the person behind the growth mindset, she went into a fourth grade in the Bronx in New York that was rated one of the worst in the state of New York. And in 1 year, that class moved to being one of the very top. I think they were in the top 10 of fourth grades in the entire state of New York in 1 year. So what happened? Did she inject some kind of IQ growth into all these students? Or is it that something different just brought out the natural talent? here, and that the school system, the generic school system, is failing to bring out. So we have to recognize, because of this, that it can't be intelligence, because we see over and over again sporadic classes that are brought from zero to huge success in very short time. So the question becomes, okay, if that shows it's possible, it shows, don't write kids off and say, well, because of where you come from, or that you are less intelligent than others. Yes, Ian.
Just to straighten out the whole intelligence thing, it is, however, there's no genetic component, but it's accurate to say that you're less intelligent when you're hungry or desperate than you are when everything is calm and you're well fed.
Well, maybe less distracted might be the better,
exactly, yeah.
The better term on that. So as I said, I spent 3 years traveling around the U.S. Studying what was going on, and I was thinking to myself, okay, for all those politicians and parents who are saying, oh, it must be the teachers. How do we explain that this school is at 92% students at grade level, and this school's less than 7% students at grade level? It has to be the teachers. And the politicians love to say that because they're an easy target. But let's play the game. What if we said we're going to take the teachers from a top performing school and the teachers from the worst performing school, and we're going to swap them out. If it's all the teachers, we should see that previously horrendously performing school should jump to way up in performance, and that previously high performing school should drop way down in performance if it's the teachers.
You know what it is, Bill? Where pupils perform well, there's a high level of pastoral care by teachers.
I actually here I only partially would agree with that, and the reason I'm saying that is, in all the teachers that I talked to, I found that I don't think I met a single teacher that didn't care. High burnout rate, really a high frustration and burnout rate in a lot of the low achieving schools. But those teachers, they care so much that they're going to extreme lengths to try to help their students. But we have to remember, those teachers operate within a system, and the system says, if it's Tuesday on the fourth week of the school year, you should be teaching this, and whether your students are ready for it or not. But I agree, and we see here that in low achieving schools, teachers, they go to great length. They buy school supplies out of their own pocket for their students. They really, really go as far as they can go. But again, we're still in the point here where that teacher is looking out there at 25, 30, up to 50 students. And what are they doing? They're saying, hey, I prepared the best lesson. Do I prepare my lesson so that I target the bottom third of my class? Or do I target the top third of my class? Or do I just target the average, where the top third is not paying attention because there's nothing new here, and the bottom third is lost because they don't have a clue of what I'm talking about? Where do I devote my time? And the lower the socioeconomic background of the class, the greater the diversity. If I go into a class in a high achieving school, I'll find that most of those students, because they come from similar family backgrounds, they have very similar preparation for school. They're all more or less at the same grade level. They have more or less the same attitude on the value of education. Hey, this is a key to my future career or whatever. But when you go into that lower socioeconomic background, the diversity and how far there's barely two students that are in the same place in their learning within that entire class. So it becomes very hard for the teacher to know what to focus on, because yes, the teacher cares about their the welfare of their students and their home life and what they can do. In fact, I saw a very interesting documentary on education in Germany, and it was showing here how teachers were going out of their way to visit the homes of the students that were doing most poorly. But one of the interesting things the documentary found was that in a significant percentage of the case in poor neighborhoods in Germany, the teachers couldn't find the parents. Literally, the students were staying with neighbors because the parents had taken a trip somewhere or were gone. And there's a very interesting program there just in Munich where my grandchildren live. There's more than 10,000 students that a famous actress started a foundation called Brotzeit, which is Bread and Time, where they get volunteers to come in and feed the children. My grandchildren's primary school that they went to was mentioned, in fact, that in the winter, there were students that were showing up barefoot in pajamas for schools because they said, if I turn the lights on in the morning in winter to get dressed, my parents will beat me. And social workers are saying, we just don't have the capacity to deal with all those situations. So that's a reality. You got to face that. And teachers suffer tremendously.
Is that modern day Germany?
Yes, it is. Unfortunately, this was just a few years ago. By the way, last May of last year, the newspapers were full that 1 out of every 4 fourth graders in Germany can barely read. So this is not exclusive to any one part of the world. Anyway, let me move on. When I said here about having the teachers switch places and whether we can expect the performance to go way up. It's interesting, when I first asked ChatGPT, what do you think would happen? They said, oh, those good teachers, they know how to come up with good lesson plans and things like this, and they know how to motivate and excite their students, and the grades are going to shoot way up here when they get in there. And then I said, well, wait a minute, let's recall, you have to remember that we're taking teachers who are used to having homogeneous classes where all the students are at the same level. They're all prepared for what you're about to teach, and they mostly are paying attention to where, and they are feeling it's important that they learn. And you're putting them into the situation where the students are 3-4 years behind. Perhaps many of them don't really understand your language very well, and they maybe a third of them were not in class or were not mentally in class because they had just viewed an abusive situation in their home life, or they maybe hadn't eaten that day. And now how's that teacher going to cope with that new situation? And then it came back to me and said, yeah, you're right. Probably we're going to see a lot of teachers quitting the teaching profession because those teachers have just never been faced with having to deal with students in those situations. So they basically, they are coming in a high achieving school from a class that is according to textbook, just what they learned in teachers college, into a class where almost no students are prepared to understand what they're trying to teach that day. Okay, so some of the false assumptions that it's funding disparity or quality of teachers. But what we really see here is the preparedness and ability of students to learn, starting schools up to 2 years behind in mental maturity and verbal vocabulary, high absenteeism in schools. I visited a high school in the Bronx in New York that when I was traveling around visiting schools, and they had put in metal detectors in the school. It was, the name of the school is Teddy Roosevelt High School. And my father had grown up in the Bronx and gone not to that high school, but a high school not too far away. In that particular high school, I said, they put in metal detectors. They had confiscated something like about 30 or 40 handguns and knives from the students in the first couple of days that these metal detectors were there. And that was only a couple of weeks before I visited the school. On any given day in that school, roughly 30% of the students are absent. They don't come to school. And then we get into the home situation, whether it's an abusive home situation or not. They're just not conducive. That when I first became interested in education goes back to I guess it was in the 1970s. I saw a documentary in Germany from I think it was Duisburg or one of the cities in the Ruhr Valley, which is a mining area in Germany. And they interviewed two sixth graders, I think it was, and two girls. The one girl, her father was an architect and her mother, I think, was a doctor. And she had a governess at home. So when she got home from school, there was somebody there to care for her. She had piano lessons and everything you can imagine. And then they went to the home of the other girl. She was one of about six children. Her father was a coal miner. Her mother was stay at home. And when she would get home and she would open her school books, her mother would say, quit wasting your time on that. Help me out with your younger siblings. And so you can imagine what the impact would be on the ability of those students to succeed going forward in school. So we have these greater distractions because of these situations in life situations. So so the primary problem, my conclusion is, it's not so much the quality of teachers. Yes, there's a difference because poor school districts can't pay as much. And especially if we get into places like India, rural India, and I'm sure Pakistan is very similar. When we get into the rural communities, the teachers aren't even paid on a regular basis, so they're paid so little they got to be working another job that's taking them away from school. The teachers are absent from school a couple of days a week, where they're trying to survive themselves. And there was a documentary I saw in England. There's a woman film producer in New York who goes around the world giving these really expensive cameras, lending them to students in different situations to document what's going on in their lives and around them. And there was a girl in central India that reporting on her school, and the video that I saw, they were visited by some bigwig in education to the school. And it turns out that half the teachers in the school couldn't read. The teachers couldn't read. But that's what all they had. The only people that were willing to be a teacher were these people who could not read. So the problem's not the quality of teachers for the most part, though. It's the quality of the students, and not the internal quality of the students, but the extreme variety in needs that students have. Is that something we can pretty much visualize and agree with, that the needs of students vary greatly, and they vary more the more lower disadvantaged a family or community is, the greater the diversity in needs that the students have.
You are right, Bill, but it's hard to expect a teacher to take on all those roles. Teacher can't be a social worker as well.
Well,
They'd have to work as part of a team.
That's something that we're going to actually get to, but I'm glad you brought that up, because that's part of what we need to focus on if we're going to be able to really deal with this. So teaching is a one-to-many model. I got a bunch of students. I'm one teacher. If it's a teacher-driven education system, it's up to me. All the knowledge originates with me, the teacher. And if I don't teach, nothing is happening in the school, in the learning. So it's essentially a one size fits all model, or a one size fits only a couple of groups model. But it's been recognized for a long time, the need for personalized education and the need to group students based on their where they're at in their education process. So in successful students, successful schools, we can see that very often we can accomplish this by fitting the students into 2 or 3 groups of where they're at in their learning process, if it's a fairly homogeneous school environment. But the needs of children from lower socioeconomic classes are far more diverse. So not only diverse in terms of their prior knowledge and what they need to learn, where their gaps are to catch up to the standard where they should be at, but in their ability to learn at a particular similar pace. That is what differs. If I've got a situation where a lot of my students are absent on any given day, or they can't concentrate on that day because of something that happened at home or on the way to school, then it's not enough just to say, okay, you're here in your knowledge and you're here in your knowledge, and therefore now I'll teach all of you that are in this subgroup, but I'm still going to treat all of you as one size fits all. I can't do that if I basically got 30 different groups of needs within my class. Okay, so what we conclude out of that, and then I need to address this, Alia was mentioned. In visiting a number of these cities, I found that there were programs for a holistic approach to education, where they pull together teams and they bring the parents and they try to educate the parents, because very often the situation is that the parents lack the education themselves. These students come from families where the parents don't have the education, or the parents are single parent households and they're working 2 to 3 jobs, so that they're basically absentee parents, that the students are sort of left on their own, or the parents are very often having so much trouble coping with their own lives that they really don't have time for their children. So in addition to that 30 million word gap that the Bloomberg study found in between socioeconomic classes, one of the things they found was children from lower socioeconomic classes, the few words they heard were almost all commands. Don't touch that. Do this. Do that. Don't do that. Rather than discussion about things that are taking place around them that would expand their vocabulary and expand their general knowledge of how things work. So we saw these programs that were in here in these different communities. Now, 2 things we found. One is, yes, they can be successful, but the share, the percentage of families, the percentage of students that these programs were able to cover was very tiny. They were nowhere near having the capacity to be able to deal with the majority of the students in the school environment. The second thing we found is that they very often they were not effective, because if the parents themselves are drug addicted, which when I was visiting Washington, D.C., that I was told that the share of children who are in the public schools there, they keep in mind the wealthy take their kids out of the public schools. The kids who are in the public schools, the share of children whose parents, one or both, were addicted was very high. In some schools, the majority of the parents or the kids had one or both of the parents were addicted in those schools. And so the parents, the problems of the parents are so great that the programs are not there. Then you've got the problem that in most parts of the world, the willingness of the parts of society that are functioning okay to go and really make a concerted effort to close the gaps to all the other parents out there is not there. The political will is not there. When we look here at that great disparity between 92% of kids at grade level in the top 10% and 7% of kids at grade level in the bottom 10%, and we can go to the state commissioner of education and say, okay, what's the plan? What's the plan? How to close that gap? There's no plans. There's no plans. I don't think I can point anywhere to anybody who's got a credible plan to close the education gaps, especially between socioeconomic classes. Yeah, we find our Rotary clubs, they do tremendous amount of tutoring and things like this, but those are bandages on symptoms. Then we're not addressing the causes of the problems. So,
Bill, can I say something?
Yes, please.
Could I say something? Okay, you mentioned about the disparity in not only in the US and Europe, but all over the world.
Yes.
But I think it's big. The reason is not that there is no money. The reason there is not even a good infrastructure. There is some places where, of course, infrastructure is a big issue. The thing is that there is not a well-developed plan that somebody is willing to implement from the top to the bottom.
Yeah.
Because, for example, in Costa Rica, the public school system, they put a lot of money. The teachers are well paid. Actually, there's a lot of ones that wants to get hired in the public school system in Costa Rica because the salaries are much better. It's stable. The infrastructure of many of the schools are much better than some of the private schools. But the results are not there. We have students in high school, they barely read, they can understand, they're getting to universities, and the level of their knowledge is so lower compared to, for example, when I went to college and I came from public school. But it's because I took it upon myself to study on my own to fill up the gaps. But and you're right. I mean, there is nobody, no institution, no government willing to put an effort or do a consolidated plan and say, okay, we're going to execute this from the top to the bottom, and we're going to monitor all this school about how they're performing, what are really, how is our money that is being invested in there producing the results that we want. But it happens everywhere. It's not only in the US, it's not only in Europe.
Yes, that's so true. And the PISA reports are very clear about that. There's only a handful of countries that are making countrywide efforts. In the Western world, it's Finland that started about 20 years ago. More recently, Estonia, that's moved up into the top rankings of developed schools. And it's interesting here what they did. We talked about last week when we're looking at how preschool, what they do to make sure that all the children are more or less at an equal opportunity position when they start school. You can't have that 2 to 4 year gap between students when they go into first grade and then say, but we're going to treat them all the same from here and expect it to be successful. But we're gonna talk a little bit here, and you need to get to that because we're burning time real quick, but I do want to get to, we have 2 hands up here right now. Mohammed, please. Mohammed, unmute yourself, please. Mohammed, can you hear me? Unmute yourself. Oh, okay, I guess he was having trouble. Oh yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
So my point was basically these underperforming children are vulnerable children, and their parents who are substance misusers are vulnerable adults. So you need to actually have an overarching safeguarding policy, which is followed by multiple agencies, including teachers, social workers, medical professionals, everyone in the local community. It doesn't cost a lot to set up, but it involves a lot of communication and confidential data transfer. It's just that you have to actually create the policy and implement it.
You know, it's interesting here. I have a cartoon picture somewheres where we're showing, and we're showing here the reaction of different groups of people to the situation. And it shows the politicians saying that, hey, if you fix the education system, that is going to fix our social problems. And the educators saying, hey, politicians, if you fix the social situation, that'll fix the education problems. And everybody's pointing the fingers at everybody else. The bottom line is we can look at decades of attempts to try to say, oh, let's fix the social world. And we're seeing here that basically the movement more and more around the world is, hey, everybody's on their own. We're not our brother's keeper. We're not responsible for the welfare of our fellow citizens.
But we've actually done it in the UK for heroin users, substance misusers who come into treatment and get put onto methadone, which is an opioid substitute. Then they go into a multi-agency network.
Okay, that's dealing with one of the issues, and we have programs like that here in the US as well. But I'm looking and saying here, okay, how has that done in relating over into the education system in the UK? Do we have that diversity of outcomes, or that disparity gap on outcomes in education?
Yeah, because heroin users become opioid substitute on users on prescription. They come into the healthcare system. Their families come into the social network. The children get educational support, and you know the children don't go into a life of drug misuse. They have successful education and careers.
How
Takes a
big
lot
is
of
the
effort.
gap? How big is the gap between the top 10% of schools and the bottom 10% of primary schools in the UK?
Oh yeah, it's massive. It's
Yeah.
massive.
And that's the
Yeah.
only thing I'm looking at here right now. I'm saying here we can do all these things, but I'm saying, okay, but what's been successful? Have we been successful yet? And if not, then, you know, and how long have we been trying those things? And if we've been trying things, as Einstein said, doing the same things over and over, expecting different results, is a definition of insanity. So we've got to go.
A multi-agency approach does work.
But it's not achieving the results. So it can work in isolated cases, but we're not seeing the overall massive results that we need. So just because something works doesn't mean it's going to be used, and it doesn't mean that it's going to have the needed impact. So we've got to find solutions where we're looking and saying, how do we achieve the educational result that we're needed? To come up with sporadic, ad hoc examples that worked is not helping us, because we're not seeing them be translated or transformed into a universal approach that affects everybody. And so otherwise we would see the Finnish program, which says, okay, we're going to bring all children starting as early as 6 months of age into a truly effective preschool, where we start off with highly effective educators with child psychology backgrounds and a student-teacher ratio of 2 students to a teacher, and that grows over 6 years to only 7 students per teacher, and is extremely successful. Why isn't that being copied everywhere? And I can tell you there was a debate in Germany and saying, hey, should we do that? Because one of the first things they did was ban private schools. No, you want to improve your children's education, invest in the public schools. And it was greatly rejected in all the polls in Germany that no, we don't want to go down that path. So seeing something that works in a isolated situation is we can learn from it, but unless we can figure out a way to make that the universal solution, it's not doing what we need to accomplish. Joan, you also wanted to add something.
Yeah. All of this is well, a good example that I'm going to demonstrate for myself right now. But all of this we need is a real shift. I'm finding that we're talking about education and school in the old way. But the old way was teaching people how to work for others, work in a corporation, be obedient, going from 9 to 5 to get your pension and all of that kind of stuff. But society is going into an entrepreneurial mindset. And teachers are ill-equipped to teach that because they're into the administration, old school sort of things. And there's a disconnect with the technology and what's happening. So, I mean, we should be looking at teaching entrepreneurial mindsets as well as reading, writing, and arithmetic, and technology and communications, and because that's the future. And I think that's part of the frustration of a lot of young people is that it doesn't line up with the future. So, and professors are teaching the same old blooming thing that they were teaching for 40 years when they got their contract. You know, like what about their updating? And instead of looking at kids using AI and cheating, what about them getting themselves updated and looking at what's needed for today?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's very interesting. You mentioned here we're still doing the same old thing. I think I've mentioned this before. Those of you in North America may be aware of the story of Rip Van Winkle. Rip Van Winkle was when New York was still New Amsterdam, a Dutch colony. There was this story about this man who lived up in the Hudson Valley somewhere who fell asleep, and he woke up 200 years later, and he was shocked by what he saw. And so there's a joke going around in the education community here that if Rip Van Winkle woke up today and looked around, yeah, he would go, "Oh my God, what is this? These cars, what are, horseless carriages, and what's that thing that an airplane just flew over my head? And what's an airplane? Oh, look at this telephone here. What's a telephone?" And he would be shocked. Every single thing he would see would just blow his mind. And then he would go into school and he would feel totally at home because nothing's changed in the last 200 years. So I think, yes, you're 100% right on that. But getting back to here, I'm sort of trying to walk us through a scenario to put us in a mindset. But what we're really saying is, we can't have this finger pointing. Oh, we'll fix education after you fix the societal problems. We have to come up with a solution that will work, even if the students don't have the same knowledge when they start their school life. We have to have a system that will work, even if students are absent half the time, and any given day they have missed a number of the prerequisites to the day's lesson. It has to. We have to have a system that will work if they're absent physically or mentally. If they're struggling here because of their home life, or they're hungry or whatever, the system still has to achieve the result. We have to be successful regardless if their home situation has no electricity, no internet, they have no space to sit down and even have a quiet situation, and they're required to work, or they're required to take care of their siblings or whatever. The education system still has to achieve its education goals despite those situations. We can't make those situations a prerequisite to success in education. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because if we don't, we're going to be 20 years from now. Well, we won't be 20 years from now because AI is going to get rid of us all in 3 years. But no.
Bill, just a quick note. You've identified the problem, but you haven't given any solution yet.
That's where we're going.
Only about 10 minutes to go.
Yeah. Okay. So You know, some people say, hey, we need lower student teacher ratios. And that's where the funding difference comes in, that we see schools that have low funding have higher student teacher ratios. And if we're in that environment that it's teacher driven, so we have a one-to-many, one size fits all, the more students we have, the more diversity we've got in needs, and the less effective that system's going to be. And I want to point out that there's this saying goes something, we can learn by hearing, but we learn more by reading, and we learn even more by seeing and observing, but we learn best by doing. And I think that comes from a Confucius statement that sort of says, I hear and I forget, I see and I remember, I do and I understand. But the diversity of the students is even greater than the ability of teachers to listen to what the teacher and understand what the teacher's saying. It's a question of timing. When we see, how do you learn to do, for example, multiplication or long division? That doesn't differ. It just differs, when am I prepared? When have I met all the prerequisites to be able to understand that particular math concept, for example? But we still have another problem. And even if we could get and say we have a one-to-one student-teacher ratio, so every student has their teacher there who's going to teach them what they need to know. And the problem is that the new supreme goal of education is that we have to prepare each student to be a successful lifelong learner. You cannot go out today and say, I learned that I'm finished with my learning, now I'm set for life. Yeah. That's what's causing those deaths of despair here in the United States. Everybody has to be learning continually, and to learn continually, you have to be confident in your ability to learn. So we really need we have to teach. Teaching, the problem is teaching isn't helping students to become successful independent learners, because it doesn't help them learn how to learn. If I am teaching you, I'm becoming a crutch. And when you're 35 years old, me as a teacher or somebody like me is not there to tell you this is what you need to do to learn that new thing you need to know. So we need an education system where each student practices learning how to learn. That has to be the primary focus on what we're doing. And we need to go and be so dedicated to that. We have to make testing, evaluating how well students are doing in learning how to learn. Not just learning chemistry and biology and math and history, but learning how to learn. Yes, Mohammed.
Yeah, humble greetings to everybody. I'm very sorry for joining late as a result of the poor network here in Sierra Leone. I am Mohamed Sisse, founder of Sierra Leone Educators Association. I want to say thanks very much to Mr. Bill for organizing such a wonderful meeting. I think I have learned a lot based on what all the speakers have said. I just want to give a brief history about the educational system here in Sierra Leone. Of course, Mr. Bill mentioned about what are some of the problems of education across the world. So I would like to highlight some of the problems that we are having here in Sierra Leone. In as much as I've been working in the field of education for the past few years since I established this organization called Sierra Leone Educators Association, I've been moving from different communities, especially the marginalized schools, wherein most of the problem that I experienced there with the kids learning there is, one of the things the teachers that are working there, most of them are not trained and qualified. And you will find out that if a teacher is not qualified, like to stand in front of the kids to give them the knowledge, that particular teacher will not be able to deliver very well. So you will find out that most of the teachers there are some drop from school. They couldn't pursue their career, maybe reach to university levels. But as a result of the love for teaching, they decided to join the teaching field, wherein just to help the kids living in those marginalized communities, help them so that they can able to learn. And also, most of those communities, they lack learning, conducive learning place, where in some of the kids you will find them, learning under trees, mango trees. There is no well structured schools wherein they can have a better learning place. So you find that most of the kids, sometimes they did not feel interested on the class. They sometimes, absent. They will sometimes did not go to school as a result of learning is not too much favorable for them. So that is another problem in the educational system here in Sierra Leone. There are little learning infrastructures that are not conducive for the learners. If the learner is not having a very good place wherein they can able to sit down and learn, definitely they will not get interest like to even go to school. And also the learning materials sometimes is not sufficient. You find out that some teachers go to school, they did not have what we say a notebook for the kids to teach the kids. They did not have a lesson note
Mohammed,
they are going to use.
yes, Mohammed, excuse me. If you can hold that, because as Ian pointed out, we're running out of time, and we have a very concrete proposal for how we can overcome that, and it changes the whole situation of what a teacher is. So if you joined late, you may have missed the point where I said we're not going to deal with the shortages of facilities and infrastructure or quality teachers in this particular session. So if you could hold your comments, because I think you may want to comment differently after I present, and I'm very close to where we're diving into the actual solution. Is that okay?
All right, yeah. In as much I joined the meeting late, I know the meeting has been on for a very long time now. So I have shared our link in case would like to have more discussions in terms of these problems that is happening in schools, especially here in Sierra Leone. I'm
Yeah, you're going to see here
always open to
in a
have a
second.
conversation related with
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
In a second, I'm going to be presenting a solution here. As I say, it could totally change the way you approach education, even in Sierra Leone. Okay, so let me continue on at this point. I want to point out here that we need an education system that's like helping a child learn to ride a bicycle. When we're helping a child learn a bicycle, you hold the bicycle and you walk with them a little bit until they're able to balance themselves. But then you step back and you let go. And you stay next to the student here, but the student is the one who's now riding the bicycle. And as the student becomes more confident and stable, you back further off and you back further off. So the idea here is that teachers need to take the approach. Our job is to get the students to not need teachers. That's their job. So we have to change the whole mindset of education is about teaching. Education is not about teaching. In a perfect world, the education system wouldn't even need any teachers. We do need mentor coaches. We do need somebody to be mentors to young people. We need them to be coaches to young people. But when a teacher teaches, they become a crutch and they actually hold a student back from learning. If the person that's helping somebody learn to ride a bicycle never lets go, and they keep holding that bicycle along the way, that child will never learn to ride a bicycle. So this is very crucial to what we're talking about here. If our primary goal is to help people become successful lifelong learners, you cannot be a successful lifelong learner until you're a successful independent learner. And to become a successful independent learner, you have to be doing the learning and on your own. You have to learn how to learn. So on the one hand, we need to provide the students, obviously, because we say, hey, here's some basic things we expect you need to know, whether that's how our society works or how to learn, or just the basics of a lot of subjects so that you can understand the conversations that are taking place around you in the world relative to these subjects. But we can provide a learning roadmap and then watch their early attempts to follow the map. And then as we see that they're being successful in following the learning map, we back off further and further. So at the beginning, we're helping the student know what are the steps to learn something. And here's the roadmap of the dependencies. And then we start to back off. So this includes not only knowing how to read the map, but knowing what do you do when you come to a river or you come to a cliff, or what do you do in each individual learning unit? What's the approach to working with that learning unit? So we need an apprenticeship program for learning how to learn. That's what we need to really do. Students need to know, how do I find learning resources? How do I use those learning resources? Either by watching a master or a video of the master, by asking questions in order to learn how to do something. And then I practice doing the learner. Then I need help in evaluating the results. Did I do a good job? Hey, master, come take a look at this. Or, hey, system, come take a look at this. Did I do a good job? And then I iterate on that process until I've improved to an adequate level. And then on that particular skill. And then I move on to the next skill. So once the student knows how to walk and navigate challenges and read a map, the next thing we do is they have to have a map. They have to know what the sequence is. Now, in our education system, the map lays out the skills that you have to learn. Now, almost every textbook breaks it down into units, then into chapters, and then into sections. And usually each section of a textbook describes how to do one particular step. And then it gives you a couple of questions to practice that, and then it goes on to the next step. So we see examples of skills. If we're looking at addition of whole numbers, it's how do you add single-digit numbers? Then how do you add multi-digit numbers without the issue of carrying? We'll avoid the carrying. And then we go in and we increase that to say, oh, and how do you add multi-digit numbers where carrying is involved? So you have to master each of those skills in sequence. And subtraction, it's the same thing, except instead of carrying, we're talking about borrowing. What do you do if the number you're trying to subtract from the digit you're trying to subtract from the digit above it is bigger than the digit you're trying to subtract it from? And then we get into the dependency relationships. So some skills are dependent on you knowing other skills to be able to do. For example, you're going to have trouble learning how to do long division if you don't know how to do multiplication, and if you don't know how to do subtraction. So we've got to provide the map that says, okay, here's the sequence of things that you need to know, and here's the dependencies that you need to have mastered. So if I look at math, and because we're getting into concrete examples here, what does grade level mean? Grade level means you've mastered a certain number of skills that say you're at this level in your knowledge. That's the level of knowledge that you've achieved. And for example, in most preschools or prior to kindergarten, there's about 20 foundational skills in math that you need to know. And those include things like being able to decipher that symbol is the number 2, and that symbol is the number 4, or even the concept, what is a number? And so there's some very basic skills. And in kindergarten, there's 30 skills that have been defined. This is based on Common Core here in the United States, which is very heavily influenced by the Singaporean model for education. And so we go up, and it tends to increase 29 skills in first grade, 75 in second grade, 141 in third grade, 154 in fourth grade by the time you're into percents and dealing with fractions and having to add and multiply fractions and doing word problems. Altogether, by the end of fourth grade, there's 449 skills that have been identified in Common Core, and this is taken from Khan Academy. Khan Academy is that system that is out there for, it's being used by, I think, 140 million students around the world, and all levels and things for nursing, for all kinds of subject areas there. So just to give you a sense here, these are the skills for preschool. These are skills for kindergarten. So we see addition within up to 5, subtraction up to 5, adding and subtracting up to 10, word problems there, and so forth. Counting to by first grade, count up to 120, doing addition, subtraction up to this, comparing 2-digit numbers, understanding place value, tens and ones, and understanding using equal signs. So we see each of these skills is very tiny. Typically, it's a 5 to 20 minutes to master one of these skills. But we can see that as we're going through these, that if you have not mastered some of these, if we get down to a further number further down, you're going to fail if you haven't mastered the prerequisite ones. So Khan Academy actually maps this out as sort of a dependency network, showing, okay, here for this particular learning unit, these are the ones you have to have mastered. And to master that, you need to have mastered these other ones prior to that. And so you're able to follow through that that sequence. Going into second grade, we see that it gets into more and more complicating, subtracting patterns up to 1,000, rounding and word problems, and so forth. And then getting up into third grade. So we get add and subtract up to 1,000, telling time, money, multiply by multiples of 10, and dividing by factors of 12, multiply whole numbers using a distributive property, 2-digit numbers using arrays and models. So this gets into more complicated things. And then on into fourth grade, perimeters, area and perimeter, decimal fractions, and divisions, as divisions, getting into angles and measuring angles, and so forth. Now, so here's the thing out of that. So if we're looking at these, the question is, if a child mastered all 449 of those math skills through fourth grade, would they be considered to be at not 109%, but 100% of the fourth grade level in math? Would we be able to say, hey, if you can do all of those reliably, consistently, are you there? Have you mastered fourth grade? You're at the fourth grade level, 100%? And at 1 hour a day in the classroom, no homework, in the classroom, with access, for example, to Khan Academy, would you be able to master those all 449 of those skills in one school year? In other words, can we take fourth graders who are starting fourth grade, send them back to kindergarten, and say, now you work your way through all 449 of these skills, and by the time you get to the end of that, you will be at 100% grade level mastery, which means you should probably be able to get a 95% on a grade level exam at that point. And that's based on the idea that about 60% of the skills, you're only going to need an average of about 10 minutes because you know those. You got to remember, we have recognized the number 8 is a skill. I don't think most students, or even students who haven't learned much, are going to have trouble with that, or being able to add numbers up to 10. So you're gonna zip through a lot of those. 30% is probably going to take you 30 minutes. Because the idea here is when you go into a new skill unit, a new learning unit, the first thing you do is you see whether you already know it. The first thing you're presented with is the exam or the assessment. And keep in mind, these are not summative assessments like you would get in an exam. These are formative assessments, trying to understand. Have you mastered this concept? Are you ready to move on, or do you need to deepen your understanding of this particular assessment? So the first thing you're exposed to is, here's the exam, here's the assessment to understand, do you understand this? If you know that skill, if you recognize what symbol 8 stands for, you're going to zip through that probably in just a couple of minutes. The way Khan Academy used to do it is you needed to get 10 in a row correct with no mistakes. You make a mistake, you're on the 7th one, you made 6, no mistakes, you messed up on the 7th one, the 10 starts all over again. You got to continue until you get 10 in a row. That shows that you really have mastered that unit. They've gone away from that a little bit, but personally, I think here that's something here that probably should be kept. But the idea, and so if I look at the exam and I say, I'm sorry, I don't get this at all, then ask for a hint. Or if I start off, I get a couple right, but then I get some wrong, then I can ask for a hint. Oh, can you give me a hint? What do I do here? So the hint might jog my memory, and now I get that one right. I can get that one right, and I get all the subsequent ones right because it jogged my memory as to the process of how I solve that kind of a problem. But maybe the hints don't help me enough. Let me see. Do I have? Yeah. Okay. So so you start off, you attempt the mastery assessment. If you have difficulty, you ask for hints. If I got one hint and it helps me a little bit, not enough, I ask for another hint. I ask for another hint. And if I keep asking for hints, eventually it will walk me through the whole process. But if the hints are not enough, I still don't understand why. Okay, watch a tutorial video in your language, or read a textbook, or seek out other resources. If the tutorial's not enough, ask AI to explain. Khan Academy's added this thing called Khan Migo, which enables you to ask any question about anything. And so I can say, well, why does that work? How does it work? What do I do next? Why did what I did not work? And if you saw the demo from 6 May, ChatGPT demonstrated that a child was trying to understand a geometry problem with a triangle, and the child drew a line with a marker on their screen, and the AI understood what the child was drawing and explained why that was right or why that was wrong. So so that AI is coming there, but even if it's not there right now, that's okay. We can go on. If that's not enough, you ask somebody to help. Ask the student sitting next to you. In our schools today, the whole thing is, hey, you don't talk, you listen to what the teacher says. Here we're saying, students, oh, you know what? You got a problem, ask somebody. You take the initiative. You don't wait for the teacher to be telling you what to do. You don't wait for anybody. You take the initiative to get yourself unstuck. So escalation is an exception. The bottom line are the students are driving, and they're driving the initiative. They're taking the initiative. They're learning how to learn. Okay, so so one of the things, does that make sense? Does it make sense? We got 449 in math here through grade 4. If we go out there and we say, fine, you're going to go back to kindergarten, you're going to work your way through, you're going to, each of these 449, you're first going to come in and it's going to ask you to demonstrate and prove your mastery of that particular learning unit from that particular concept there. And then if you did it right, you move right on to the next one. And if you get that right, you move on to the next one. And in the early years and the things you know well, you can maybe do 20 in an hour. Okay. But if you get stuck and you say, I need to go through some hints, maybe it's going to take you 30 minutes. And if you actually have to watch a video, most of these videos are about 7-8 minutes that they have for, because these are very simple concepts here. How do you carry in doing an addition where you've already mastered how to do the addition without having to carry? It doesn't take half an hour to explain just that one aspect of how do you carry a number. They're very simple. Division, there's about 5 or 6 steps that you master along the way until you're finally getting into more complex types of division problems. Okay, so the question is, can you see how this sequence, how the roadmap of saying, here are the 449 things that if you master every one of these, you have now achieved 4th grade mastery. Do we all agree that would be the case for math? For math mastery, if you master all 449 of these, not just getting it one question right, but by getting here, you've answered almost 4,500 questions correctly to get to that point. And if you made a couple of mistakes, probably about 5,000 questions along the way.
Bill, I think you made a good point. Yeah. The thing is about the exam, this kind of exam, it has to be a standardized exam that is everywhere, because if some people have an exam that is very easy, it may look like you master all the skills.
Right.
And somebody else, like in a different country, use their type of exams are a little bit higher order level thinking. And so it's a little bit much harder.
So,
but I agree with you about
that. Here's the answer to that. If you're using Khan Academy, or there's several other platforms out there like it, Khan Academy is the most widely used because it's free and because it's so comprehensive. But they have, for each one of these lessons, there's a tutorial video that explains that particular thing. The tutorial videos are available in a large number of languages across the world. All of the screens and the lessons are available across the world. It works even if you don't have internet. There's a version that's called Khan Academy Lite for schools that do not have internet connectivity. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But the idea here is the system does the evaluation, and the system does these formative assessments. So at the end of the year, you may have your school system says, okay, here is our exam to say, have you mastered 3rd grade? Now, in the United States, we have 2 testing authorities that create the standard tests that are applied across the country by schools. But ideally, it's always a third party that is going to do those kinds of assessments, so that it puts the teacher on the same side as the student. Just like if you're an athletic coach, you're there. I think I've related this a number of times. When I was in school, in 10th grade, I think it was, or 11th grade, I had a chemistry teacher who was a nitpicker. And he was always trying to trip the students up. He would ask you questions that would embarrass you in class because they were so hard to answer. And everybody hated him. He was the most hated teacher in the school, I'm sure, because he was the enemy. He was always trying to make you look bad. And you could barely, even top students in the school could only get a C in his class. He happened to be the coach of the track team as well, the track and field team. And he did exactly the same behavior. He was always criticizing and saying, no, look, when you jump on the high jump here, you've got to flip your leg here at this point to get to higher heights. And you know what? We loved him. Why? Everything he did, every critique he made of us was trying to help us win. It was trying to help us become winners. So the idea here is get that teacher on the same side of the student, so that the student sees the teacher as the coach that's helping them win. There's that third party out there that has this exam that's going to try to make us look bad. And we've got this coach here who's trying to help us max that exam and look great. And the system, as far as all the day-to-day stuff, the system is handling that. The system tells me, hey, if I completed this skill, this one of these 449 skills, if I completed that, Now here's other skills that I can take because I've completed all the prerequisites for those skills. We should never, ever ask a student to learn a skill they have not mastered the prerequisites for, because that's just setting them up for failure. And so the student moves on their own to the next subject, to the next learning unit, to the next learning unit, as they master each learning unit along the way. And the teacher has now become a mentor coach. They are like the person helping somebody learn to ride the bike. They're sitting on the side and watching from the sidelines, and they're coaching the student not in how to do long division. They're coaching the student of saying, "Oh, did you ask for a hint? Did you watch a tutorial? Did you ask somebody else? Did you ask the student sitting next to you?" But the whole thing is, what did you, student, do to take the initiative? They're there trying to help you learn how to learn. They're trying to help you learn how to ride that bicycle. And after they've asked you a couple of times and you didn't ask for the hints, you're probably going to automatically ask for the hints every time after that. So they're teaching you how to get unstuck. They're not getting you unstuck. They're teaching you how to get yourself unstuck in the future. And so the amount of time they have to spend with a student will become less and less and less as far as the educational side goes. Now,
Bill, which subjects are included in Khan Academy, and how many languages is this translated to?
Khan Academy, I don't know. A couple of years ago when I was maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, it was in 40 languages. But I know it's now many, many, many more languages than that.
Subjects, I know math.
Subjects, there's over 10,000 videos, everything. You can take math all the way up to advanced calculus at a master's degree level. You can do nursing from zero nursing all the way up into the whole subject of nursing. So biology, chemistry, languages, pretty much you name it. They've partnered with a lot of third parties on that as well. Now, I have to say something.
50 languages, Bill.
50 languages now? Okay. Now, one of the things that's really, and keep in mind, we discussed last week how we can go and prepare students whose mother tongue, perhaps is a tribal local mother tongue or whatever, is not the language that their schools use in their particular country. We can use them to get them prepared. So by the time they start school, they're up to speed in whatever language they need to do to continue their education. The other thing what's very important to understand about Khan Academy, there's a tremendous video out there from Sal Khan about mastery, about being mastery based. But when he started off, he said, look, the thing that's wrong with our education system is the idea of teaching. The idea of group-based education, which is assuming that I spew information out and everybody absorbs it at the same level and the same levels of proficiency, which we know is not true. And it's not just because of their capacity in that day. It's because of how they grew up in the first 6 years of their life and many, many other factors. We know that different people have different learning needs. And what we're looking at here is by putting the student in the driving seat. And so the student, you go back to kindergarten, you now go and work your way through those 449 skills. As I said, you're going to go through 60% of them probably in less than 10 minutes each. So at the end of 1 year, the end of 4th grade, you're going into 5th grade at a level for 4th grade math, because you will have mastered every single concept, that everything that is built upon for 4th grade math is out there. And you can use the same thing for language skills, for almost all the subjects in school. But we picked math to focus on initially because math has the smallest language component. Math is very concise. It's also very exact. There may be 5 ways to express a particular thought in language. But when it comes to math, the algorithms are, that's what they are. There's no ambiguity on it, and no variations. And because children, young people think math is the most complicated thing, the most difficult thing to learn, when they excel in math, it boosts their confidence level up way so that they become better in all their subjects. There's lots of studies out there showing that a student who becomes exceptionally well in a difficult subject, that translates into their performance across many subjects. So the bottom line here is, though, can you now see, based on what I described, how we could take a fourth grade class where less than 10% of the students are at grade level, send them back to kindergarten, and just literally have them work their way through in multiple languages. If you're in the United States, you're probably speaking one of those 50 languages there, if it's not English, and you can work your way through that entire sequence there, and fully master everything through fourth grade, to the point that you should be able to come up with at least a 95% on a summative math exam. Now, math exams in general, those kinds of exams, one of the things we're calling for is if you take this approach, students are learning at their own pace. As I say, there's no teacher in the front of the class. The teacher is on the side. The teacher is working on a management by exception basis. The students that have learned to do well on their own, have learned how to learn, and they're doing well on their own, you're letting them go, which gives the teacher more time to focus on those students that are having trouble learning how to learn. And the more often they intervene with those students on learning how to learn, the less those students are going to need such interventions, because they will improve their ability to know how to learn. And the other thing here is that we have to watch, what about the students that's not putting in the time, not putting in the effort? Well, as I said, first of all, we're looking at 1 hour a day, because we're saying, hey, we're not depending on homework. If a student wants to do homework and they want to move 3 grade levels in 1 year, hey, okay, go ahead for it. But we're not going to make a dependency on a student having a home situation that is conducive to learning. You should be able to achieve everything you need to achieve within that 2 hours. Now, keep in mind that school I mentioned in Austin, and again, I'll get back to you, Ian, and try to get the exact contact information there. But because of going and having student-driven, AI-supported education, the students are able to master everything they're expected to master in their grade level that they're at in just 2 hours a day. Okay, so we get that efficiency, which frees up a lot of time for us. But the students are all going at different speeds. So when we go into a low-income school where the students are all over the map, that some students are going to be in the same class, some students are going to be working at a 3rd grade level, some of them are still at a 1st grade level, some of them are at a 2nd grade level. Nobody cares, because we have this high absenteeism. Who cares? Hey, you're absent for a couple of days, you pick up where you left off. You don't pick up where the class is now, you pick up where you left off, and you work your way through. So not only do you end up having mastered through 4th grade, but you've mastered how to learn. And it should boost your confidence, because a student that goes into 5th grade, where all you've heard is you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, and your grades are horrible, you have no confidence. And we see there that they start tuning out. That 5th grade, that between 4th grade and 5th grade is when most students start to totally tune out to learning. But a student who sees themselves as very successful in learning, they don't tune out. They're confident. They're ready to go on to the next things that they're learning. And if you can compress the amount of time they need to learn those fundamentals, those mandatory things, there's more time for them to be doing project work on hobbies or arts or learning all the other subjects that excite them. So they're learning how to apply these things as well. Okay, so I want to hear, we sort of covered, well, okay, I have to summarize that. If every student's learning at their own pace, what we've done is we have eliminated the idea of time and calendar in education. There's no such thing as this grade level being a certain age. There's no such thing as 1 year per grade level. There's no such thing as tests are only given in May of a year, or in the next to last month of the school year. The tests are given on demand. When you think you're ready, you take the test. But one of the things on there, we eliminate high stakes testing. There's no such thing as failing a test. The only question is, did you pass? The only two answers that are acceptable is yes or not yet. Because guess what? You didn't pass this week. You know, bone up on whatever you were weak on and take it again next week or the week after. Whenever you're ready, and you take it as often as you need until you pass, because the goal is not how much a teacher taught, it's how much the learner learned. And you learn on your schedule, not on the teacher's schedule or a school system schedule. Another thing about the tests have to be such that taking it repetitively doesn't give you the advantage, because you remember the correct answer to question 3 was such and such, because there's no two same question 3s on multiple instances of the exam. Every exam instance is different. And Khan Academy does that. They actually are able to generate billions with a B, test questions to test your mastery of any particular learning unit. And again, they're not the only player in that game on mastery-based education, but they're one that works. So you take the exams until you need it. No two exam instances that should be in the end are the same. So there's no advantages. And there should be no multiple choice questions, because the teacher doesn't have to grade anything. The system goes, asks the questions, and gives you the feedback. Did you get it right? Did you not get it right? If you did not get it right, to tell you why and explain it to you, so that, hey, you take the next question, you start your stream of 10 all over, but now you understand, why did I get that wrong? So hopefully you'll be able to get it right. If that's, as I said, if that's you come into something in the pattern that you have trouble with, only then do you escalate to hints or into a video or into asking somebody. So do we see how this could achieve that result of 95%? Kurt, you've had your hand up for a while.
I'm excited about what you're saying about education. The one thing that struck me is on Friday, I got in contact with a man named Edward Mueller.
Oh, yeah.
He was the president of the International...
His sister's the Minister of Education of Costa Rica.
Yes. Well, Edward is one of these geniuses, that he's also the founder of the University of International Cooperation. And he gave us a picture that I put into the chat. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the human being there, it could very well be the last human being in that area. It is a desert. It was the Amazon River.
Yep.
20% of the Amazon River is gone. We wonder why we have a category 4 or 5 hurricane now. We wonder why there are so many forest fires. We wonder why the permafrost is unfreezing, why the glaciers and the ice in the entire planet is disappearing. But we don't have any more time.
Yeah, you're right. And this is one of the issues that I have with education here, because we're talking about young children, and young children here, it's going to be a number of years before they're in a position to influence the world. But it doesn't have to be that many here, because I've seen children as young as 10 who are willing to grab the reins and say, we got to change things. And you know, the more confidence they have in their ability to understand things, the more confidence they have in their ability to try to change things. But again, the focus though of this session, and I'm down to 20 minutes. I gotta end. I gotta end here by 12. And Ian, and that puts us an hour over. That's why I'm so glad that I found that software that's going to help me compress these videos down into a much shorter versions. The focus here is specifically because we covered last week some other things, and there are all kinds of education things that we could focus on. But this particular session this week is about finding a solution that is going to help students learn how to learn, become independent learners, become lifelong learners, and be successful in learning the foundational skills that are going to be needed for them to get accredited, if you would, by our formal education processes there. And so I realized that there's a lot of things of what we educate on, but right now it's how do we help those students build their confidence by being successful in the standard things here. And we've been focused pretty much like on fourth grade here to say, how do we have a project called Ready for Fifth. And that project is based on the idea of having every student go into fifth grade being 100% grade level ready to succeed at fifth grade. Because when we talk to teachers, the biggest thing they point out is in their fifth grade, especially if you're from a local lower socioeconomic background school, their biggest problem is the children coming into fifth grade are not grade level ready. They're not able to comprehend the fifth grade materials. And so that's when they start to drop out, because it's now gotten difficult enough and they just are unable to follow and drop out. So the goal is to have every student going into fifth grade fully grade level ready to succeed in our existing school structure. Then we can start working on saying, hey, you know what? We need to change what we're focusing on the teaching and how we teach. But for right now, it's the things that the students are being graded on that they need to be able to do well on those. Otherwise, it's going to damage their confidence and their ability to cope going forward, especially with the younger children. Does that make sense? You're muted, Kurt.
For me, it makes sense for educating people and for getting them to be grade level and being able to be working at their own rate and so on. And it's exactly what we need to do. It is not the old style education.
Oh, yeah.
When I put into the chat about ways that we can use youth to be able to change the trajectory that we are on in regard to our climate. We can give them the challenges of how is it, like I put into the thing about 70% of the causes of pollution are created in the homes. And so there's green actioneers, and they have a way to be able to get kids to be able to say, oh, look at this is what we can do to be able to have less pollution. And this.
Here's the problem, Kurt. Until we get them to have the most basic education skills and any confidence in school, in the value of school and the value of education in general, that's a mute issue because they're not capable of considering or caring about these issues because they've given up on most of those things in life. So we've got to get these students to the point where they're saying, I can learn anything at any time. Now we can go and say, hey, what do you think about the various crises facing the world, such as climate change? What do you think about that? What do you think about what we can do about that? When you're going into fifth grade, you're 10 or 11 years old, as I've pointed out, that's the point where we can say, hey, you write your own book on advanced physics at a master's degree level. You go and come up with the participate in the competition to see what school team can come up with the most outrageously audacious solution ideas to major world problems. Because just getting them to start thinking, I can come up with realistic, I know how to research items, I know how to think about problems. These are where we're trying to go. But until we can get them to have the basic skills and the confidence, we cannot talk to them. They are not receptive to those other issues. And I see this in my grandchildren's school in Germany. And Germany has had, until recently, one of the most successful Greens Party. They're saying that the kids, they live in a mixed neighborhood, that the kids here, Fridays for Future, the kids laugh about them and joke, and they don't want to know anything about that. So they're the people who believe in fake news because they don't have the education to be able to be critical thinkers enough. And that's what we've got to change. But we have to do it quickly because time is against us. Climate change is not happening on our schedule. It's happening on its own schedule. And that applies for so many problems. The advancements of AI. If we don't come up with a way to figure out how our society is going to cope in a jobless society, that's going to come regardless, and we're not going to have the time to think about it. So right now, this session today is focused strictly on how do we close the education gap to get all students to be, by the time they're going into 5th grade, to be confident, independent learners. And then we can start building on that capability. Yes, Ian.
Yeah, so what I was going to say is what AI is doing is mapping the insights. And, by having AI teach kids, that gets that information into them, and any insights that they have as a result of their education will feed back into the AI. So when people are looking for solutions to climate problems, the fact that you've had kids there learning about it and giving their opinions about it means that those opinions will be out there.
Right.
And this is a very important aspect of it.
But keep in mind, it's very important that this is not calling for AI to drive the education process. This is calling for the students to drive the education problems, whereby AI is one of the tools that you can use. But the more important thing is that you're able to go and assess what you've mastered and what not, and whether or not you've got to delve deeper to master each of the individual learning elements along the way to a level of mastery. The mastery, it's like the belts on a judo or karate. Did you get to a red belt? Did you get to a blue belt? Did you get to a green belt, or whatever the sequence is? That's what being at level 2, a grade level 2, means, that I've achieved that level. This is about how do I get to that point where when I take that exam, I'm able to have the credential to say I've arrived, I've gotten there, I'm at full 2nd grade. So I hope that makes sense. But I want to stay away from the climate discussion and so forth here, because that's something different from right now. The focus.
I mean, what we're doing is making more intelligent kids.
Yes,
that will solve climate change eventually.
And the question is, has what I described, could it achieve what we've been talking about, of getting all of our students, literally all of them? Some of them might accomplish it in a year. Some of them here may not get to 4th grade level in that 1 year, but they may get to 45% of the way or 75% of the way, and they're that much closer to, in the following year, closing that gap, in this case then up to the 5th grade level.
And better than that, I mean, they've gone through all their assessments. They almost don't even have to sit exams because they already know they're up to the level.
Absolutely. They're doing the exams only for the people on the outside who say, hey, look, I've got
who don't know any better.
Yeah. So I've passed this milestone, right? But we know here that the milestone is that 449 skills that you've mastered along the way. Those are the milestones that count. The milestone that just says collectively, I'm now at this plateau level, is literally for the outsiders. Paula, yes.
Yeah, my point is, yes, I understand that you have to get in the objective here is to get the kids into the level, the grade level at all four, and using fifth grade as the target initially. But I also agree with Kurt about the environmental issue. Not that we are going to shift this away from the skills that we want to accomplish, it's because environmental is like a STEM. STEM is a big thing nowadays, but it started 20, 25 years ago. I used to volunteer at STEM when it was at the infancy. Now it's more about implementing environmental into the educational system. Why? Because the students are facing a digital dilemma. A lot of them are they're given an iPad, an iPhone, or a computer, a laptop since very early age, and they don't even know how to deal with their emotions. Environmental is going outside and studying nature, studying math, science by touching it, by looking at it, and it's implementing into math as well. So by the time those kids are in second, third grade, I saw it with my students. Every time I wanted to plan a class, a lesson, I used to take them outside. Okay, let's build a wind device to study about the oscillations and the intensity. And we went outside and they loved it. Just being outside the classroom. Or just let's each one of us make a rain gauge. Let's go outside. Okay, let's collect to see how much rain we collect every day and put it outside. And I used to implement it with simulations and all kind of different things. Environmental is the way to go. We're going to be talking about this 25 years from now, but right now it's at the infancy, and I want to be there too.
Yeah.
And when it gets to fifth grade, I mean, we are going to have all this, the climate change issue, because these kids are going to be dealing with us, perhaps not us, because we're just going to be the conduit for them to deal with that in a way that the fathers, the grandfathers make the terrible mistake of forgetting about that.
But right now here, if I look and I go to Camden, New Jersey, where 7% of kids only are at grade level in fourth grade. I'm looking here, how do we get those kids to even care? How do we get those kids to know anything? So right now, the goal is, how do we get, so in New Jersey, we don't have 92% of the wealthiest students' schools being at 92%, and the schools in poor neighborhoods being at less than 10%. How do we get everybody to being above average? The average for the state of New Jersey for fourth grade math is of schools is only 45%, or pardon me, of students across the whole state is less than 45%. Less than 45% are at grade level. So how do we get that up to the point where students are not going and saying, oh, how do I get my grades up? That's my whole thing. That they can start thinking about, what are the problems in the world? What can we do about it? But the first thing we got to do is we've got to eliminate the gap. We got to close the gap. So this is why when we're looking, that's what we're talking about here. How do we close the gap so that every child has an equal opportunity? Now that opportunity is not going to necessarily be to earn money in 5 years, because they're already talking within 5 to 10 years that we are going to be losing literally billions of jobs, because there's not going to be any job a human can do better, faster, or cheaper than an AI or a robot. And by then you're not going to be able to, you're going to see robots walking on the street, but you're not going to know the robots, because you're not going to be able to tell what's a robot and what's not a robot. And already I would estimate by the end of next year, you're going to have avatars on your TV and on the in a department store on a screen. If you go to the returns department, you got the person on the other side of the screen. It looks like it's a human sitting back there, but it's just an avatar. And we're going to give demonstrations here literally within the next few weeks, because this stuff is coming now. But those young people, a young person who knows nothing, who is going to take at face value anything anybody or any avatar says and just do it, they're going to be lost. They're going to have no chances. We need to have people who are creative but critical thinkers, who are good reasoners, that are able to go and have a satisfying life that's not based solely on how much money I can make in a job. So we have to prepare that. And we have very few years left to get that into place. I see this as a way to get it. Now, I didn't mention here something I do want to mention is the teachers. Keep in mind, the teachers, we no longer have classes. So the idea that, oh, I'm going to take my class outdoors and we're going to do this, we don't have that. We could have the project session, but all the main course things is students are doing that individually, because it's what's in the head of each individual afterwards that's going to count for that. But with the students who are all at the same place, we can have actually literally classes on how to collaborate together more effectively, how to be more empathetic. All those things can be actual classes that we can actually help people learn. And that's where we bring together a whole bunch of people who are at the same level and therefore able to, of thinking and preparation and so forth. Now, teachers, the teacher becomes a mentor coach. They get on the sideline. They're like the person that's helping the person ride a bicycle. They're helping a lot in the beginning, and they're backing off and letting the students learn and succeed on their own. But the system, Khan Academy, is actually watching literally every mouse click and everything a student does. And they are able to report how each student is doing and progressing relative to their peers. But they're more than it. They're able to go and say if a student is taking more time than normal on a particular skill or learning unit, they're able to drill in and actually play the video, if you would, of what that student did. What did they click on? What did they answer as the intermediate steps to solving that problem? And very shortly, it's going to go to the point of being able to view where a student is able to saying, oh, draw a triangle that fits within this circle that does this or does that. And it's actually going to be able to observe the child drawing the circle and drawing the triangle. And what did they do right? What did they do wrong? So I can drill in to understand where and why a student might have gotten themselves into difficulty. I see when they ask for hints. I see when they watch tutorials. I see, did they stick with the tutorial to the end, or did they only watch the first couple of minutes? So the system is monitoring the students' activities as well as their progress, and reporting as an alert system to the teacher. Hey, take a look at Johnny over here. Johnny is having more than usual difficulty with this particular task, and see how can I help Johnny now? And also if they're seeing, hey, Johnny hasn't clicked on anything for the last 45 minutes. He's only putting in 10, 15 effective minutes per day. So then I can go and talk to Johnny and say, Johnny, what's up? Is there something bothering you, or what might be distracting you, or what have you? Or if I see absenteeism is higher than normal, to try to find out, okay, why is Johnny absent so much? We're talking early grades. Is it because the parents are not bringing him to school on every day, or what is it? And even into disabilities, to be able to understand here, did we offer learning aids that are appropriate for certain kinds of disabilities? So there's all kinds of things
Bill,
that we can do.
yeah, Bill, I have to go. I'm sorry. So the question you're asking is, do we think this is a good approach? Yes, I think it's a very good approach, because it's multi learning approach. You're learning, you're doing, somebody's monitoring you, you're practicing, and you're going back. So I think that when people do something, learn something, do it, repeat it, they're going to get better at it. There's just no way around it. You made a comment about that AI is here, and robots and avatars are going to be around. I feel like that most people are like that now anyway. So we wouldn't be able to tell the difference, because they live like robots, if you ask me. You know, people don't question things and analyze things, and they're not used to other people. They don't take like other people's culture in consideration when they're making
They're
decisions. It's
operating
just about,
according to standard operating procedures.
yeah, yeah, there you go. So, you know, like we need to become more global citizens. We need to be aware of how our decisions affect people in the Amazon.
Mhm.
Just because they're not making money doesn't mean that they're less valuable. In fact, they're more valuable because they're connected. They have knowledge, and that's the thing that we sometimes forget is the knowledge and wisdom, not just the education. There's so much emphasis on education all the time. It's good, but there's also knowledge and wisdom that those people, if they die, that wisdom dies with them. And so, you know, but a good beginning is to try to get people on an even plate so that they can learn. And I'm all for that. So anyway, I have to go to another meeting, which starts now, but thank you so much for doing this. This is great. See
Okay,
you on Monday, I guess.
thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
Mohammed,
Bye-bye.
you were trying to, you had your hand up a little while ago. Then I'll come back to Ian. Mohammed, did that, what I described here, change anything about your thinking of how this might apply to Sierra Leone, what this might mean for education there in terms uh, of literally bringing in that leapfrog of getting to the point where the students have learned to become independent learners, how that could work in a country like Sierra Leone if we can satisfy the infrastructure needs to support it. Okay. I don't think Mohammed is able to respond here. Ian, did you want to say something else?
Yeah, on the wisdom front, I think in the Netherlands they have a system where you can go to a library and they have a list of people that you can talk to, and you can talk to somebody from a particular background that you're interested in and have a conversation, find out more about their life experience. So my wisdom thing in there.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. You know, Khan Academy has something similar, where you can go and talk to Julius Caesar and anybody living or dead, and ask them about what was going on while they were alive, or what the thinking of different people were to different historical situations. Fascinating, and it's the kind of thing that takes people's imagination, especially young people's imagination, and gets them going wild to be able to imagine that I can go and I can hold a conversation with some indigenous people's leader from the Amazon region.
It would be great for history lessons, because there are these characters, and you don't, you know, they're a paragraph on a page in a history book, and you know nothing about them at all. You know,
Absolutely, and
the
the interesting,
a half an hour. I mean, almost only the same amount of time you took to read the paragraph, you could get some sense of this person. You know.
Yeah, and the thing about it is you can do things like ask the Mississippi River what they thought of Lewis's and Clark's expedition. So you can ask the pyramids what it was like when they were being built. So you can talk to inanimate objects as well as to people. Okay, so our time is up. I hope that we've gotten a sense of the idea that if we're going to succeed, we are not going to succeed in a teaching-oriented model, because that's a one-size-fits-all, and we know it does not work. The lower the socioeconomic class, the more diverse the needs of the students are for learning, and therefore we need a way that's going to handle it. We're not going to go and get one-to-one student-teacher ratios, and if we did, that's not going to help that student become a successful independent learner or be prepared to be a successful lifelong learner, because when the teacher teaches, the student is passive. the student is not learning how to learn. And so this, hopefully we showed how, in the example of Khan Academy, we can do that. We're hoping to we're looking for schools where we can go and take, find a number of schools. We'd like to get at least 10 in a region of schools that have never been successful, have always had difficulty getting even 10% of their students to grade level, and how we can, in 1 year, using fourth grade math as the example, because if students, let's say, the vocabulary, the amount of vocabulary you need for math is very finite, it's small, that even students who, let's say, don't have English as a mother tongue or do not have whatever that school language is as their mother tongue, can learn that narrower vocabulary relatively quickly, and it boosts their confidence level like nothing else. So we're looking to take fourth grade math and demonstrate that we can totally close the gap, regardless of where they're coming from, so that those students going into fifth grade will be fully fifth grade ready. And if we can take those schools and raise them from less than 10% of students at grade level in fourth grade math to over 70% of students at grade level in math, given that the state cannot achieve 50%, that is going to be the talk of the town in the media. I want to ask one last question, Sean. Sean, this is your first time here. What are your thoughts to what we've been talking about?
For the majority of the time I was riding and just listening in, I was definitely excited about this conversation, because this conversation is exactly what I do. One, in part because of some of the conditions that the kids are faced with learning in the schools. I mean, some of the kids here, even in the United States, that's where I'm at. I know some of us are abroad. I'm here in beautiful sunny South Florida, but some of the challenges that the kids are telling me, that the AC is not working, the food, the conditions that they have to learn in, and it makes it difficult. So these are some of the challenges, and that's what raises my fight. It just raises the giant up inside of me, because I'm one that's strong and I'm big on education. I have a leadership program, and I do work with Muhammad over in Sierra Leone, where we have we're teaching these kids the fundamentals of public speaking and how to become leaders. I think that before you can become a leader, you have to have the education. And where does that start? That starts with the words, the power of the words. Words, they guide us in life. And I just want to just step aside from this, because I just experienced this in my life and why it's fresh on my heart. The way adults are, one of my passions is bridging the gap between the adults and the students. I just had an event just happen to my own son. He's a part of a club, and the club, you can pay for it per the whole term, which is about 10 weeks, or you can pay for it weekly. So I've been paying for it weekly. And I just experienced a situation where I pay it every week I come. And for this particular week, I dropped my son off, and I had to take my mom like 10 minutes away. And the director of the program said, sit down and wait till your dad come back to pay the money. So I text my son, he texts me, and I text him back and said, are you serious? So now I asked him to put the director on the phone. So he puts the director on the phone. I said, well, I'll be right there. It's not like I'm not there. But I think that it's a respect that you have to have as an adult, and along with the children as well. You don't sit my son down until I come back and pay a bill. I pay the bill. It's not like I owe you a bill. So what I did was I came back, I paid the bill. Well, then she goes, well, you can pay for this week. I said, no, I can't. I say, because you just told him he cannot bowl until I pay the bill. So guess what? I say, well, my son, he just learned a valuable lesson today. You don't allow anyone to treat you any kind of way. So I'm an advocate for him. How do you think this make him feel, where you sat him down as a sort of punishment and you want to take it out on the parent? I say, I have a program, and in my program, I have several programs. I have a leadership program, and I also have a computer coding program where I teach these kids how to code. And it's not free, but as I promoted it, it is free. I do it totally free for the summer, for the first term. And as we move into the new year, yeah, we will implement a pay structure. But for the first 6 months of the program, I don't charge a dime, not one penny. So to treat me like that, now that really drives my passion to go and promote my program and get these kids in here, because you telling him to sit is the difference between him making a decision. You don't know if he was on the cusp of going out in the streets and starting to get into drugs and get into violence and stuff like that there. So I'm not for that. So
Yeah.
my son will not be back here.
Yeah.
So now this is going to just make me create another program to drive my passion for this Saturday, the same time that we're going to utilize that time, and we're going to help others. That's what we're going to do. So the same time that you would use to bowl, you're going to use to help someone else. And that's how you turn that around.
Yeah.
And Bill, I know that you and I, we're going to be having, and not just Bill, but all of us. I'm just excited about these kids. I grew up without a father in my life. My mom had me young, and I was raised by my grandmother. And all of this fire that I have inside of me is coming straight from my grandmother and me just watching. I don't like kids to be mistreated, because there's things that I experienced in my life that I don't want kids to go through that, and I won't allow that.
Great.
So
Great.
thank you, Bill.
Yeah, one of the models we are following is from a Rotary International president of about 40 years ago. Actually, he's the guy that came up with the idea that led to the Polio Plus campaign. And Ian, no, not Ian, Clem Renouf, Sir Clem Renouf from Australia. And we've paraphrased something he said. One of our goals is to create extraordinary opportunities for young people to do more with their lives than they or their parents or teachers ever dreamed possible. And getting students to believe they can learn anything and do anything in their lives is a first step towards making that possible. So this is why I'm looking right now. I'm hoping that at the latest next year, we can get 10 schools out of the 136 primary schools that are in the bottom 10% to volunteer, actually to compete for the right to participate in a pilot project to demonstrate that we can take schools that have never gotten even 10% of their students to grade level to over 70% of their students at grade level in just 1 year, at least for fourth grade math. And that means learning all the math from kindergarten through fourth grade and having them be among the top in the state. And I would love to see parallel programs in other parts of the world that are looking to do the same thing. Find schools that are perennial low achievers, but where the educators believe it's possible to turn it around totally, and then let's demonstrate it, and let's get the press involved so that we put a big spotlight on what these schools and kids are doing, so that we almost make it impossible for other educators to say, well, there's nothing I can do about the situation, because we're demonstrating that every school can resolve the problem.
And can I say something, Bill? I'm a former PTO president too of a school of about 1,400 kids. It was a low, below the grade level school. We ended up raising the parent participation. When I first came, the parent participation was like 10%. I raised it up to 80%. I came in within 1 week. I raised over 20K. I gave each grade level for kids that the parents maybe having financial struggles. I gave a surplus of $1,000 per grade level for kids that could not have funding to go on field trips. So I did that per grade level.
Yeah.
And that was like maybe $6,000 that I put per grade level. I turned the parent participation up in the school. Like I say, again, I rose it up to about 80% of parents participating. I just raised so much. There was a robbery by a local restaurant. It was a McDonald's. They got robbed, and it made statewide news. So what we did a fundraiser, was spearheaded by myself, where I did a family night, and the family got to come out and bring the kids to get McDonald's who wouldn't want McDonald's. They tripled the amount of money that they lost within the robbery. And I also gave the school their first fun day, and I built a relationship between the city and the county, which was never done before. And we gave the kids, the families, the first fun day, and that hasn't been duplicated since.
Well, that's the problem. Now we've got to figure out, how do we replicate successful programs across all the schools, first in all the developed countries and in the developed areas within developing countries, but then eventually to all children. Paula, you have the last word, and then unfortunately I do have to end the meeting.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's
Paula.
fine. Okay, perhaps you explained this at the beginning, and I didn't join us an hour after. This thing about the 10 schools that you have want us to get involved, to bring them to up to 5th grade level. Is this within the United States, or can we do it where we are? Or can we do it
I would
online?
love to do it, because I want to get here Edward Mueller. I would love to get his sister involved. We're trying to reach out to Leonardo, the former Minister of Education of Costa Rica. Edward's sister is the current Minister of Education. The former Minister of Education is the special assistant to the Secretary General of the United Nations for Education. So what we want to do, there's this whole big push for transforming education worldwide. So we want to get the Secretary General engaged. Next year, 26 is his last year. His tour ends in 26. We're trying to point out that the way things going right now, the only thing he's going to be remembered for is wars he wasn't able to stop, and a pandemic that took place in his tour, but he didn't accomplish anything. And so we want to help him be able to point to something he really accomplished, so that he can set the bar for his successors to say, now, okay, we need to accomplish that on all the different goals and problems we have around the world. So Costa Rica, I would love to do a parallel session, find some of the worst schools in Costa Rica. Let's get the secretary, your Minister of Education engaged, because I also want to get her. Costa Rica is very highly respected among ambassadors working with UNESCO. So I'd like to get her engaged to put together a committee of ministers of education of countries around the world to say, let's stop going and piddling around and tweaking little things on the edge. It's not making any difference. Our total education standard worldwide is declining from year to year. We are not getting better. We are declining, because China has already pretty much maxed out their education, and they account for almost all the improvement in education worldwide for the last 30 years. A couple of other countries, Vietnam mentioning one, and have also improved and during that period in that. But China, by and large, and because they've maxed out and they're not having kids, we are not getting that improvement. And the rest of the world population has actually been getting worse in education results from year to year. So I'd love to get Costa Rica, find 10 schools. Let's put together a presentation that explains what the opportunity for those schools are. We want to turn the administrators and the teachers in the schools that participate into heroes. We want to go and just imagine here that they are able to totally do something in their schools that has been unimaginable, that has been not possible for decades and decades. And now they're the ones on the front line, the teachers and the administrators that made it happen. And we can help them do that, and we can get the support of Khan Academy or others. Khan Academy has the big advantage, as I say, it's free. It's available in Spanish and English and all the major languages. So it should be something that would be very easy to implement. And we're working on a program to create a competition among low achieving schools to compete for the right to participate in a pilot. So we make sure that those who are participating are really, really committed. They've got pledges from all their teachers, all the parents, all the administrators.
Okay, Bill, I like to volunteer to efforts like this, but it has to be very organized. How do we start? What do I have to do for my part? I don't want, one thing I want to make sure you understand is I do not want to be in politics. I don't want to be in this deal like it just becomes a piece of paper. I actually want to do it. And that's why I wanted us to be organized. I know you have certain goals. I have goals, and I would like to use my knowledge and put my efforts into something that is achievable. And I know this is achievable.
I'm a co-conspirator in the project and influence the whole direction of the entire effort. That's the way to do that. And we have in Costa Rica, we have two other groups. We have a major model UN network in Costa Rica who is also a member of our club. He is very active, actually all through Central and America and Northern South America. We have another student group from Costa Rica that is very active. So if we can pull, I can connect you up with these other movers there in Costa Rica, and we can see what we can do. And Mohammed, I don't know if you can respond to us now, but as you were able to hear, what we're describing here as a modus operandi for schools is probably very different from the way the schools that have been working or what you've been trying to do there in Sierra Leone. Are you able to comment now on that? I don't know. I get the impression he can't maybe. Can you unmute yourself? Okay. Okay, then I have to say goodbye for today. I thank you all. I think we had very good discussion. Paula, to your point, we have a lot of papers describing how we would recruit schools, how the whole bit. So I will share that. Mohammed, yes.
Bill, there's Mohammed.
Yeah, Mr. Bill, I'm so sorry. I heard you saying something, but the place was so noisy and the network it sometimes disturbs me actually. So I just want you to come again, sir. You were saying something. I did not get you clearly.
Okay, the key thing we were talking about here is an education system that's not dependent on teachers. So that could be very different. And the video here, I'm going to try this new technique to put this video because it's over 3 hours. Oh, why? Yeah, it's over 3 hours. I'm going to try to put it into this tool and compress it down to about 20, 30 minutes if I can, so that it's because it's just not fair to ask people to watch all these 3-hour videos. So that we will try to do that, and that will give you a better idea of what we're talking about. Sierra Leone, as I think we've chatted about there, I'd like to get David, your chief minister there, who's the former minister of education. I really want to get him involved because he was the primary spokesperson for all the ministries of education around the world with UNESCO. And so he has the contacts and things like this that could really help us move things forward on a global scale. So I will be in touch, everybody. And thank you so much for your participation today. And I will see everybody. I don't know if we're going to be able to hold a session next week, but because normally we've been doing every 2 weeks, but for the last month and a half or 2 months, we've been doing every week. And believe it or not, it takes a fair amount of prep time to go through and pull the information together for these sessions. So we'll
Good job.
see what we can do. Okay.
You do a good job, Bill. You're doing a great job, and thank you. You off with
Well,
get
okay.
as it is.
Yeah,
It's all done.
Mr. Dean, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you,
Yeah,
everyone.
thank you so much for organizing
Hey,
a wonderful
Bill, thank you.
meeting.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I learned a lot.
Thank-
I learned
Yeah,
a lot.
assalamualaikum.
Which I hope I'm going to implement it here in Sierra Leone.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye now.